Chapter 89. Mom, is that uncle not picking up our calls? In a room that was decorated very simply, to the point that apart from a bed, nothing else could be seen. A girl slightly older than Pin was hugging her mother, and her mother couldn't help but shed bitter tears. Back to the topic. Let's turn our attention back to Gahan. In the entire Yuzhong Bay City, there weren't many restaurants that served pork. The most famous one was probably a pork restaurant called Chanel. Legend has it that 1,000 years ago, Chanel was already a famous luxury store overseas. Is there any luxury item in this world that's more expensive than a pound of natural pork? None. Therefore, Chanel must have been selling pork 1,000 years ago. A history expert said. However, Chanel was considered a very commoner's luxury pork store. At 11 o'clock in the afternoon, when lunchtime had just started and Chanel had just opened for business, the entire store was already packed with people who came to eat pork. Gahan was only late for 20 minutes, but there was almost no place to sit in the entire restaurant. So it's Mr. Gahan, welcome. But I'm very sorry. As you can see, there are no empty seats in the restaurant now, can you? After scanning Gahan's personal terminal and discovering that he was a citizen, the waiter's attitude toward Gahan immediately became a lot more respectful. In this base city, anyone who was a citizen was not to be trifled with. Do you mean, should we go out? Or should we wait here for a while? It didn't matter if Gahan waited for a while, but the little lowly Pin he was hugging was already drooling while staring at his fingers. If he waited any longer, she would probably bite off a piece of meat from his body. No. I mean, can you share a table with other customers first? The waiter said carefully. Many of the citizens were arrogant, but when they heard the waiter's suggestion to share a table, they immediately became pretentious and cursed at the waiter. If it wasn't for the fact that Chanel was backed by the Hongshan sect, there were even people who would have flipped the table. That's fine, as long as you serve the dishes quickly. My precious sword maiden is starving. Guhan flicked Pin's cute little nose, indicating that this was his precious sword maiden. So it's the esteemed Lord Swordsman. The waiter took a deep breath and became even more respectful. He almost bent over and led Gahan to a table that was only occupied by one person. Sitting in front of this table was a big and burly man. His casual clothes were pulled up to his chest, revealing a round beer belly. One of his feet stepped on the chair next to him. This posture was no different from that of a hooligan. There were no dishes on the table, but there were already 2 empty beer bottles. Drinking beer on an empty stomach, this man was really a man. Yo, there's a cute boy. Come. Accompany uncle to drink. The burly man said casually. Looking at his age of 30, he was more than old enough to be Gahan's uncle. Why don't you have any manners? Before Gahan could lose his temper, the waiter unhappily criticized the burly man. This is the esteemed Lord Swordsman, a warrior who fights for the future of mankind. Unlike you, who only knows how to drink and is completely useless. Lord Gahan, don't mind him. I'll find you someone to share a table with. Don't sit with this vulgar fellow. The waiter pulled Gahan away. Don't. I was wrong. The burly man hurriedly apologized and grabbed Gahan's collar. So you're the esteemed Lord Swordsman. I was blind. Let me treat you to a drink. How about the authentic Shaoxing Nu or Hong? There was still an authentic Shaoxing Nu or Hong in this day and age. Even the current geographers had different opinions on where Shaoxing was located. Currently, the Shaoxing Nu or Hong sold on the market was said to be brewed by a machine that was created by the 100th generation of Shaoxing's descendants. Gahan, I'm hungry. The surrounding was filled with the aroma of pork, causing Pin to drool. She couldn't wait to sit down and eat the meat right now. She didn't want to walk any further. Forget it. Let's do it here. Just hurry up and serve the dishes. Gahan didn't mind the burly man and didn't want to wait any longer. He directly sat across from him. All right, then Lord, what dishes would you like to order? How many pounds of meat? Is it synthetic or natural? Can you introduce some dishes to me? What dishes do you have? All right. The waiter tapped the personal terminal on his wrist. Pictures of delicious dishes appeared in the air. Since you came to Chanel, there are 3 dishes that you have to order. These 3 dishes are our signature dishes. Everyone who tried them said they were delicious. Look at this steamed pork with rice flour. It's made from the most tender and juicy pork belly of the pig. Paired with rice flour, lotus root, and taro, the steamed meat is fatty but not greasy. The sauce is very fragrant, and the taste is salty and sweet. It's a lingering aftertaste. Look at this picture. Filet mignon pork chop. This is a recipe left behind from ancient times. Using the best filet mignon pork tenderloin, drizzled with white wine, butter, and other exquisite sauces, it's a delicious taste. I guarantee that after you eat one, you'll want another. This last one is the most powerful one. It's the legendary dompa pork passed down from ancient times by the sage Su Dompa. Legend has it that Su Dompa saw an eagle chasing after a pigeon one day. Su Dompa took pity on the pigeon and told the eagle to let the pigeon go. It's also a life. The eagle refused. The eagle said that if I let the pigeon go, I'll starve to death. Is the pigeon's life important and my life isn't? Su Dompa is indeed a great sage. When he heard this, he said, "How about this? I'll cut off my flesh for you to eat in exchange for the pigeon's life." When the eagle heard this, he felt that it was a good feeling. So he found seasonings like rice, oil, salt, soy sauce, vinegar, and tea. He cut off Su Dompa's flesh and stewed them together to make this famous Dompa pork. What happened after that? What happened after that? Ching Pin, who was fascinated by the story, hurriedly asked. After that, the eagle and the pigeon lived happily together. What about Su Dompa? Su Dompa cut off so much flesh. Naturally, he died. Tricks. This eagle and pigeon were full of tricks. Wow, Ching Pin wants to eat Dompa pork. Ching Pin wants to eat Dompa pork. After hearing this touching story, Ching Pin suddenly had a good impression of Dompa pork. He clamored to eat Dompa pork. Waiter, give me steamed rice flour pork, filet mignon pork, and Dompa pork. Also, give me some side dishes and 2 bowls of rice. Gohan bitterly smiled and shook his head. According to the information he found, the one who cut off the meat to feed the eagle was Shimin Ching. What does this have to do with Su Dompa? Do you want synthetic meat or natural meat? The waiter asked again. What's the price of synthetic meat? What's the price of natural meat? This synthetic meat is 50 renminbi per caddy. Natural meat is 800 renminbi per caddy. How many caddies of natural pork do you want? The waiter's words immediately set the price above natural meat. Natural. Natural. Ching Pin wants to eat natural meat. Well, Gohan didn't need to choose. Ching Pin had already made his choice. Gohan was helpless. He could only nod his head and said, 1 caddy of each dish. Gohan's personal terminal only had 2,000 renminbi left. It was exactly the price of 3 caddies of meat. The waiter happily returned to the kitchen. Only Gohan, Ching Pin, and the strong man who was drinking beer were left on the table. The burly man drained a large glass of beer, then mysteriously moved closer to the poor man's side and whispered, "This sword lady, don't be fooled by that waiter. The one who cut the meat to feed the eagle is not that Su Dompa, but that Wang Angshi." The dishes ordered by Gohan and the strong man were almost sent to the table at the same time. Gohan arrived more than 10 minutes later than the strong man, but the dishes were served at the same time. It could be seen that the kitchen really sped up for Gohan. Gohan didn't touch the 3 meat dishes. He just picked up some dried radish and ate 2 bowls of rice. As for Ching Pin, she looked very domineering. Because she was not tall enough, she directly stood on both of Gohan's legs. She picked up a large piece of steamed pork with rice with 1 chopstick and held a piece of Dompa pork with the other hand. She took a bite and directly stuffed it into her mouth. It could be seen that the strong man wanted to talk to Gohan very much. While eating, he kept looking for topics to get close to Gohan. For such a person, Gohan didn't even pay attention to him. She lowered her head and buried herself in eating without replying, which made the strong man feel bored. 1 meal of 3 caddies of meat. For an adult, it was a very huge weight. After eating 3 caddies of meat, there was basically nothing else in the stomach. But Ching Pin was different. Although she was a little Lolita, 3 caddies of meat was not enough to fill her stomach. After sending the last bite of steamed pork with rice in her mouth, Qingpin's greasy hand directly reached out to Gahan's face. Gahan, Qingpin wants more. Qingpin wants more. Wait. Gahan reacted quickly and grabbed Qingpin's small hand to prevent her from approaching his face. No money. I don't have time to give you food. I still have to buy clothes for you later. Wipe your hand and we'll go. No, I want to eat meat. Qingpin refused. She pouted and raised her mouth high. Her hands desperately wanted to scratch Gahan's body. Waiter, give me another 3 caddies of dompa pork. Suddenly, the strong man on the opposite side shouted, which made the waiter next to him startled. Okay, it's coming. The waiter smiled and went to place the order. The strong man patted the table and said, Sword lady, come and chat with Uncle Luo. Uncle Luo will treat you to meat. Okay, Uncle Luo. Uncle Luo is so nice. Immediately, she happily chatted with that Uncle Luo. As the saying goes, whoever has meat is a mother. Chapter 90. From 11:30 p.m. to 2:30 p.m., Qingpin ate and ate and ate for a full 3 hours. The plates on the table were piled up to half a meter high, and this was the result after the waiters came to clean it up 5 times. However, the waiters weren't surprised because sword maidens often came to Chanel to eat. For example, a famous swordswoman who came last time ate even more than Qingpin. By continuously providing delicious meat to Qingpin, the brawny man and Qingpin became closer. Now, Qingpin directly sat on the table next to the brawny man and stuffed food into his mouth. Little lady Qingpin, why don't you follow my Uncle Luo in the future? Your swordsman's master is poor and can't afford to raise you. Uncle Luo will treat you to barbecue every day. How about that? This Uncle Luo finally revealed his true colors of kissing Qingpin and eating meat. It turned out that he wanted to kidnap Qingpin. Gahan couldn't take it anymore. He wanted to stand up and teach this man who didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth a lesson. Abducting a sword mistress in the middle of the street was a crime punishable by death by shooting. Beating him up was already a light punishment. However, before Gahan could make a move, a large plate of dompa pork filled with the aroma of wine and syrup was thrown at Uncle Luo's face. Uncle Luo's face instantly looked like it was covered in feces. Oomph. Don't think that you can bribe Qingpin just by treating Qingpin to some meat. Qingpin is Gahan's precious sword maiden. Qingpin likes Gahan the most. After saying that, Qingpin jumped up from the table proudly and threw herself into Gahan's arms. Idiot Gahan, our Qingpin's stomach is bulging. Let's go buy clothes. Then, Gahan carried Qingpin and left. None of the waiters present dared to stop him. Only Uncle Luo, who had a bitter look on his face, was left sitting in his seat. Sir, do you want to settle the bill? The waiter who had led Gahan in at the beginning walked over with trepidation, deeply afraid that the other party would suddenly attack and hurt him. But she had no choice. She was the one who brought Gahan in. She should be responsible for paying the bill. I'll pay. I'll pay. How much do you want? Uncle Luo wiped a piece of dompa meat off his face and raised the personal terminal on his wrist, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. The 3 of you ate a total of 108 pounds of natural pork, which is worth 86,400 renminbi. We will round off the change for you, and you can just pay us 86,000 renminbi. He actually ate so much. Uncle Luo's face twitched unnaturally a few times. This was 86,000 renminbi, which was the cost of living of a small family for about 3 years. Even if it was him, it would be a price that would make his heart ache for a few days. Hurry up and transfer the money before I regret it. After hearing Uncle Luo's words, the waiter was startled. He quickly swiped away 86,000 renminbi from Uncle Luo's personal terminal. I've just coordinated the sword bearer for 2 days. Uncle Luo revealed a smirk. You won't be able to pay me back in this lifetime after cheating your Uncle Luo's money. Qingpin. Gahan suddenly called Qingpin's name while walking on the road. What? Qingpin turned around and looked at Gahan with a puzzled look. In the blink of an eye, Gahan took advantage of the moment the poor boy turned his head and immediately lowered his head and kissed the poor boy's cheek heavily. What a fragrant little face. It was filled with the smell of green apples. After secretly kissing Ching Pin, Gohan instantly regretted it. His face also turned red. What's wrong with me? How did I become like a pervert? I actually kissed my sword lady secretly. Is this still the Gohan who is determined to avenge his parents and doesn't get close to women? But then again, it seems that about 40% of the sword bearers have a certain level of friendship with their sword lady. Baba, what the hell am I thinking? That's right, I must have been touched by Ching Pin's action of smashing that vulgar man's face just now. That's why I kissed Ching Pin like that. I'm just emotional. I don't have any other thoughts. Gohan struggled in his heart for a long time before he finally convinced himself that everything was just emotional. Gohan, your saliva is so smelly. Ching Pin, wipe it. Ching Pin used his still greasy little hand to wipe his face where Gohan kissed him. Then, he sniffed his little hand and made such a judgment. He didn't know whether she smelled the stench of Gohan's saliva or the meat on his hand. Look at your face, it's all greasy. Gohan glanced at Ching Pin's shiny face, then looked at his own shirt that was also greasy from Ching Pin's rubbing. He suddenly felt a little disgusted. Ching Pin, come down. I'm tired of carrying you. After saying that, he squatted down and was about to put Ching Pin down. I don't want to. Ching Pin don't want to come down. When Ching Pin saw that Gohan wanted to put him down, he immediately grabbed Gohan's collar and desperately climbed up Gohan's neck. I don't want to come down. Ching Pin is tired. Ching Pin's belly is bloated. Ching Pin is pregnant. Ching Pin don't want to come down. Stinky Gohan, bad Gohan, you just secretly kissed Ching Pin, and now you're going to throw Ching Pin to the ground. Ching Pin don't want to come down. Ching Pin was so noisy, especially when he said that Ching Pin was pregnant, so everyone's attention was focused on Gohan. Gohan's face stiffened, and he had to give up on the idea of letting Ching Pin walk. He ran like he was flying towards the clothing building. The clothing building was the most comprehensive and the cheapest place to sell clothes in all of Yuzhong City. Basically, the people of Yuzhong City all bought clothes in the clothing building. Only the citizens or those with some spare money would choose to go to the department store or other ancient clothing store to buy expensive clothes. The clothing building was different from those ancient clothing stores, where all the clothes were hung up and sold by manual labor. The sales model of the clothing building was much more advanced and sci-fi. First of all, the clothing building didn't have different brands or different types of stores, but a uniform cubicle of about 3 square meters. Gohan got a cubicle number at the entrance of the clothing building and was taken to his cubicle by the automatic escalator. The items in the cubicle were very simple. There was a mirror, a curtain, a computer, and nothing else. It looked more like a fitting room than a store that sold clothes. However, this was indeed a place that sold clothes, and it was the place that sold the most types of clothes. Hello, welcome Citizen Gohan to the clothing building, sales room 0852. Excuse me, which customer would you like to buy clothes for? Please let the customer who wants to buy clothes stand in front of the mirror. Come down quickly and stand in front of the mirror. I'm buying clothes for you. Gohan urged Ching Pin to get down from him. This time, Ching Pin didn't refuse. There had never been a girl who could resist the temptation of beautiful clothes, not even a lowly. Purchase target has been locked. Child, height 1, 20 body shape. Clothing selection range has been reduced to children's clothing. Please select clothing selection mode. The active selection type, the brainwave communication type, and the system selection type, the computer said by itself. The so-called active selection mode meant that a large list of clothes would appear in the mirror, and the customer would choose one by one. The brainwave communication mode was to communicate through brainwaves, which was faster and more accurate. The system selection mode meant that the system would actively choose the clothes that best matched the customer's appearance and body shape. System selection mode. Ching Pin wasn't human, so the computer couldn't read her brainwave, so the brainwave selection mode was ignored. Gohan had heard from Song Hama that when he and his sister went shopping in the clothing building, she would spend 5 consecutive hours choosing clothes, so he decisively gave up on active selection. Excuse me, which type of children's clothing do you want to choose? The system continued to ask. Let's start with a princess dress. Gohan said without hesitation. His sister loved to wear princess dresses, so Guhan's first reaction was a princess dress. Understood. System selection begins. The mirror that originally clearly reflected Qingpin's appearance suddenly blurred, and the whole surface of the mirror rippled like water. After a few seconds, the ripples stopped, and Qingpin appeared in the mirror again. However, this time, Qingpin's body in the mirror had an emerald green princess dress. Looking at the real Qingpin, she was still the same, wearing the same clothes, and her face was dirty. Looking at the Qingpin in the mirror, she was wearing a princess dress, like a little princess from the Wizard of Oz. So beautiful. Guhan was stunned. As expected of the clothes chosen by the computer based on Qingpin's appearance, it perfectly complemented Qingpin's lowly, sweet, and clingy princess temperament. Guhan was instantly conquered by the image in the mirror. Qingpin, let's buy this one, okay? Guhan mumbled to himself. Okay, Qingpin likes this dress too. Qingpin jumped in front of the mirror and said happily, Princess dress, serial number 26454, price 256 renminbi. Are you sure you want to buy it? Yes. Do you want to try it on now? Try it on now. Okay. The customer's body is not clean. Do you need cleaning service? This service will cost 10 renminbi. I want to be clean. Guhan looked at the oil stains on Qingpin's face. He definitely could not save the 10 renminbi. The curtain in the cubicle slowly fell, blocking Qingpin from Guhan's sight. Of course, a girl had to be covered when changing clothes. Behind the curtain, a few mechanical hands came out and took off Qingpin's clothes. By the way, the sword lady could take off the clothes she naturally carried when awakening, but they would disappear automatically after being taken off. When the sword lady wanted to wear it, it would automatically appear on her body, just like the clothes of a magical girl. It was very convenient. Then, a large spray was sprayed at Qingpin. This spray was a liquid that could absorb dirt. When it evaporated, it would carry the dirt with it. Therefore, when the spray disappeared, Qingpin turned into the clean and cute child. There was an opening in the wall of the cubicle, and there was a small platform inside. The princess dress that the poor man had just chosen was placed on the platform. The robot automatically took out the princess dress, and the poor man didn't need to do anything during the whole process. It quickly changed the clothes for the poor man. 10 seconds later, the curtain opened again, and the little princess in the mirror appeared in front of Guhan. Chapter 91. In any case, the clothing in the clothing building was very cheap. Considering that he might not have the chance to bring Qingpin there to buy clothes in the future, Guhan immediately went into a shopping mode. There were princess dresses, coats, blouses, coats, jeans, woolen sweaters, lounge chairs, scarves, small suits, overalls, tuxedos, robes, trench coats, leather jackets, sweaters, cardigans, double-breasted sweaters, down jackets, hanfu. In any case, he bought 3 sets of children's clothing for Qingpin, 2 to change, 1 for collection, and 1 for Amway. In the end, looking at the receipt of more than 2,000 yuan, Guhan gave himself a thumbs up for his wits. It was the right decision to run away when he was angry. Otherwise, he would have enough money to buy a princess dress. Let's go. I still have to go to the Swordsman Service Center to settle some paperwork. Looking at the time, it was almost 4 o'clock. According to Guhan's plan, he still had to go to the Swordsman Committee's hall to settle the paperwork to join the ranks of swordsmen. At the same time, he would go to the medical center of the Swordsman Service Center to get his body checked. After confirming that his brain was healthy, he would unlock the game's login restrictions. As he still had to go to 2 places, time was very tight. No, Qingpin wants to buy other clothes. Qingpin slapped Guhan's hand away and continued to stand in front of the mirror. He said to the computer, Hey, Qingpin wants a very, very cute dress. Hurry up and find it for Qingpin. Understood. Start choosing the cutest dress. After the system received the command, the mirror shook again. After a while, a small and cute crocodile appeared in the mirror. Don't get me wrong. It was not that Qingpin had turned into a crocodile. It was that Qingpin had put on a small and cute crocodile costume. A chubby little face was revealed from the crocodile's wide, open mouth. Guhan, Qingpin was eaten by a crocodile. Qingpin turned around and made a suffocating expression to Gahan. Wow, I can't take it anymore. Gahan squatted down. Oh my god, how could this Qingpin be so cute? My heart was about to explode. Gahan, can you buy this for Qingpin? Qingpin pleaded. Bye. I'll buy it no matter how much it costs. Gahan nodded decisively. He decided to return all the clothes he had bought previously. From now on, he would only let Qingpin wear this crocodile costume. In Guhan's personal terminal, another large sum of money was deducted. He thought that this time, Qingpin would be satisfied and go to the Swordsman's Service Center with him, but he never thought that Qingpin would want to buy something else. Hey, Qingpin's feet are so sore. Is there any clothes that can stop Qingpin from walking in the future? Qingpin then asked the computer a very difficult question. Was there any clothes in this world that could stop people from walking? Idiot! How could there be such clothes in this world? Gahan knocked Qingpin on the head. Stop dawdling. I'm almost out of time. Understood. Searching for clothes that can stop people from walking. And so, the mirror began to shake, and a strange set of clothes appeared in the mirror. Holy sh**t. What the hell is this? Gahan expressed that he was on the verge of a mental breakdown. What did I do in my past life to have an ancient grade sword mistress? Guhan's expression was stiff as he walked on the street. Almost everyone around him was looking at Guhan with astonished, amused, surprised, and amused expressions. If it wasn't for the fact that he had to walk to the core area, Guhan would rather spend 50 renminbi on a hovercraft taxi than walk on the street. Gahan, you can do it. Walk faster. Guhan's chest was bouncing up and down. This was the main reason why he attracted people's attention. In front of Gahan's chest hung a very cute pouch that looked like a panda, and then a crocodile's head popped out of the pouch. Yes, the last piece of clothing that Qingpin bought that could stop people from walking was a pouch. However, this pouch was not worn by her, but by Gahan. No one knew how the 2-meter-tall Qingpin managed to squeeze into this pouch that could only fit a watermelon-sized baby. In any case, Qingpin easily squeezed into the pouch. Just like a baby kangaroo in a mother kangaroo's pocket, he stuck his head out and followed Guhan's footsteps, taking in the world. Hello, please show me your ID, or show me your reason for entering the core area. There were a total of 4 entrances into the core area. 2 of the entrances were for citizens and sword bearers. One was for the general entrance, and the other was for sword bearers. Apart from these few intersections, if anyone tried to sneak in from any other way, regardless of whether it was a sword wielder or an ordinary human, they would be killed by all kinds of firearms. Firearms were useless against Yuan Shan, but they were still very effective against sword wielder. Originally, Gahan, who had become a sword bearer, could enter through the special entrance for sword bearers. However, because he had not gone through formal procedures with the Sword Bearer Committee and obtained a Sword Bearer's ID card, Gahan entered through the general entrance like the last time. Hello, Comrade Gahan. Welcome to the core area of Yuzhong City. After the guard with a puffed-up face checked Gahan's personal terminal, he readily let him through. It must be hard to hold it in. Laugh if you want, Gahan said to the guard as he walked into the core area. Immediately, a burst of thunderous laughter erupted behind him. It's all your fault. Gahan angrily knocked on Qingpin's head. What kind of sin had he committed? Was this still the cold and aloof him? Since it served the elite sword bearers of society, the efficiency of the sword bearers' reception hall was very high. There were no messy procedures such as temporary residence permits, health certificates, clean criminal records, and so on. All Gahan had to do was swipe his personal terminal on the machine, sign a few documents manually, and demonstrate the process of transforming a poor sword into a sword, and then into a sword mistress. After that, he successfully completed all the procedures and became an honorable sword bearer of an ancient sword as recognized by the law. After these procedures were completed, a staff member led Gahan to a single room and handed him various basic sword bearer equipment and items distributed by the Sword Committee. These items were an identity chip, a sword bearer's handbook, a multidimensional bag, an anti-lotus suit, a general scabbard, and a brand new personal terminal for sword bearers. Among them, the identity chip was used in conjunction with the personal terminal of the sword-bearer. The identity chip was bound to the sword-bearer's DNA, so there was no possibility of forgery. The personal terminal for sword-bearers was a super personal terminal that was much more powerful than ordinary personal terminals. Apart from all the functions of ordinary personal terminals, it could also connect to the exclusive network of sword-bearers and communicate with other sword-bearers. Another important function was that it came with the world's most complete database of Yuan Ko, which would be automatically updated every week. As long as one typed in Yuan Ko's name or scanned Yuan Ko, one would be able to obtain all the known information about this Yuan Ko, as well as the previous battle records of this Yuan Ko, the number of humans and human sword-bearers he had killed, and so on. At the same time, the personal terminal of sword-bearers also had a global communication function. Unless it was in an area with an S-grade shielding effect or above, the signal could be transmitted to the base city from anywhere in the world. In short, the chances of survival would increase by more than 50% with the personal terminal of sword-bearers when they went on an adventure. The identity chip contained all the information of the sword wielder. Once it was embedded into the personal terminal of the sword wielder, it would be bound to each other. From then on, Guhan could use the personal terminal of the sword wielder to enter various places that only the sword wielder could enter. The Handbook for Sword Bearers was a very detailed manual that recorded all kinds of knowledge that sword bearers needed to know. It also included the sword bearer's basic constitution, which was a law that was specially used to judge sword bearers. Ordinary laws were ineffective against sword bearers, and only the sword bearer's basic constitution could judge sword bearers. Gohan already had a dimensional bag in the game, and now he had obtained one in real life. The dimensional bag was made of dimensional gems that were left behind in the human world when dimensional rifts were torn apart. It was a storage bag that had the ability to open up a small dimensional space of a few cubic meters. As the number of dimensional rifts continued to decrease, dimensional gems became very rare. It was said that the Sword Committee had already started to consider formulating a law to reclaim the dimensional bags that the government had given to the dead sword bearers for free. It was worth mentioning that the dimensional bag was currently filled with a full set of survival equipment and 3 months' worth of food reserves. The Lotus-resistant clothes were made of discarded materials from a swordmaster's failed attempt at forging a sword lady. They were very hard, soft, and close-fitting. They could even isolate water and fire. Even a rat-grade or tiger-grade Yuan Ko would find it hard to break through the defenses of the Lotus-resistant clothes. This was the last layer of protection for sword bearers in battle. However, when facing a dragon-grade or above Yuan Ko, it was naturally useless. The final universal scabbard was prepared for a sword lady and was also made of dimensional gems. Because the sword lady didn't need to breathe, she could freely live in the dimensional space. At present, the scabbard was already filled with daily necessities such as a bed, a computer, a movie disc, and so on, so that the sword lady wouldn't be too bored living in the scabbard. In response, Qingpin immediately expressed that Gohan should quickly put the scabbard into the dimensional bag for her. In this lifetime, she was determined to be Gohan's pouch. Other than that, she wouldn't stay in any other place. Gohan said, "I want to return it. Where can I return it? Where can I return this cute thing to me?" Chapter 92. After completing his task at the Sword Council, Gohan hurried to the medical center of the Swordbearer Service Center to undergo a brain test in an attempt to get permission to re-enter the game. Fortunately, the Swordbearer Service Center was not far from the Sword Council. After completing the registration procedure at the front desk, Gohan unexpectedly bumped into a familiar face when he headed to the test center. It was the reasonable girl who had tested his sword element value back then. "Why is it you again?" The girl was the first to recognize Gohan's face. It seemed like the incident with Gohan had left quite a shadow in her heart. "What a coincidence, it's me. I'm here again." Gohan had a good impression of this muddle-headed girl. If she had not carelessly tested him, he might not have realized that he already had a sword element value of 100 quarks. Qingpin, who was staying in Gohan's pouch, reached out a hand and mimicked Gohan's way of speaking. "What a coincidence, we're here again. Wow, so cute. Is this your daughter? Girls had no resistance to cute things. When this girl saw Pin in his crocodile costume, she wanted nothing more than to rush into Gahan's arms. Don't misunderstand. She did not want to throw herself into his arms. She wanted to snatch Pin from Gahan's arms. She's not my daughter. Gahan's face darkened. She's my sword mistress. Sword mistress? The girl blinked. You just reached 100 corks 2 days ago, and now you have a sword mistress? Don't tell me you became a sword bearer the day before yesterday. I'm so jealous. Maya is already at 1,900 corks, but she still hasn't found her own sword mistress. The girl's eyes were filled with envy. You're already at 1,900 corks? You're a famed sword wielder with 100,000 sword elements in-game? When Gahan heard this number, he was very surprised. This girl was probably only 25 or 26 years old. Without the Sword Maiden's help in battle, she had managed to reach 1,900 corks by relying on the sword essence conversion in the game. It looked like this girl's achievements in the game were extraordinary. At the very least, she was a wielder of a famed sword. No, the girl blushed. It's just a treasured sword. A treasured sword. Gahan was even more shocked. Even if it was a sword wielder with 9,999 corks, according to the upper limit of the conversion rate of 2%, the actual sword element value that was produced should not exceed 200 corks. In other words, the girl's innate sword element value was at least 1,700 corks, which was already the standard of the world's top geniuses. Someone on the forum had made a list of the top 10 people with the highest innate sword element value. The first place was naturally Kinzu, who had an innate sword element value of 15,600 corks. The genius in the 10th place had an innate sword element value of 2,054 corks, which was only 300 corks more than the girl. This girl couldn't make it into the top 10, but there was definitely a place for her in the top 100. He did not expect that a random doctor girl he met would be such a genius. When this talent was compared to Gahan's 9 innate sword element value, Gahan had the urge to dig a hole in the ground. However, on the other hand, when this doctor girl saw Gahan, she would also have the urge to dig a hole in the ground. She had 100 corks of sword element and succeeded on her first attempt at synchronization. On the other hand, Gahan had gone 38 times, but he was still immortal. The difference between them could make a person with a bad mentality break down. Fortunately, this doctor girl was born to be a carefree optimist. So, what are you doing here today? The girl asked dryly. She really did not want to see this lucky guy. I seem to have overused my brain in the game. The system has blocked my account, and I need you to give me a certificate of health for my brain to unlock it. Gahan tapped on the computer with his new personal terminal, and a complete set of medical records appeared on the computer screen. Overuse your brain in the game? The doctor girl was shocked by Gahan again. The game came with a built-in protection program for the brain. He could break through the game's protection and overuse his brain. She had been a doctor for 3 years, but she had never encountered such a case. After Gahan left, the girl went to check his medical records. The last person who overused his brain in the game had been 15 years ago. Lie on that bed. I'll examine you. This time, Gahan did not need to sit on a chair. Instead, he lay comfortably on a hospital bed. On the other side of the bed was a very traditional CT machine. It was said to be technology from 1,000 years ago, and it had not been updated much until now. After about 3 minutes of torment, according to the CT images, there were no abnormalities in Gahan's brain. Then, she used a gravitational wave scanner to scan the mental image and sword element circulation in his brain. There were still no problems. So, the doctor girl concluded that Gahan's brain had recovered and he could continue playing the game. Then, under Gahan's watchful eyes, the doctor girl gave Gahan a certificate of health for his brain. Through the hospital's dedicated network, she sent it to the game branch of BAT. If everything was normal, the login ban would be lifted tonight. However, even after the ban was lifted, Gahan still could not log into the game. He died in the game, and he had to wait for another 3 days, which was 72 hours, before he could log into the game again. As the doctor girl looked at Pin with an infinitely cute expression, Gahan left the Sword Bearer Service Center. It was time to go home. The sky was getting dark. Gahan, are we going home? Pin, who was in the pouch, suddenly asked. She sounded a little unhappy. Yes. Where else can we go if not home? Gahan had a bad feeling in his heart. Could it be that Pin wanted to know? No. Pin doesn't want to go home. Pin doesn't want to go home. Pin wants to eat shredded potatoes when he goes home. Pin wants to eat meat. Pin wants to eat meat. Sure enough, Popper was in an uproar, just like in the morning. Now she was standing in front of Guhan's chest, jumping around desperately. If it weren't for Guhan's good martial arts foundation and solid horse stance, he would have lost his balance from Popper's jumping and fallen to the ground. But Pin, I'm out of money. Guhan showed Pin the balance in his wallet. It was 5 yuan, which showed that Gahan had fallen into a state of extreme poverty. Pin's combat power was too strong. Gahan felt that even if he earned 1,000,000 yuan a month, he might not be able to support this little ancestor who loved to eat meat. Gahan, I beg you. Pin wants to eat meat. Seeing that jumping around and throwing a tantrum was not going to work, Pin decisively changed into a cute expression. Pin, I'm really out of money. Gahan was about to cry. Unknown number, 5613-259-7458. Requesting communication connection. Do you want to accept? Just as Pin was throwing a tantrum, a communication request appeared on Guhan's personal terminal. Gahan remembered this number. It had called once in the afternoon, but he had hung up on it. Hello, what can I do for you? Gahan patted Pin's head, indicating for her to be quiet. Then, he answered the call. Hello, Mr. Gahan. I'm Maiden. We have an appointment. Do you want to meet later? On the other side of the call, a gentle, charming, and magnetic female voice asked eagerly. Maiden? I don't know you. Gahan was stunned. He had never heard of this woman's name. No, wait. He seemed to have agreed to meet Song Hama's mother's friend in the afternoon. Could it be her? You are Song Hama's mother's friend? The woman who wants to buy my citizenship slot? Yes, it's me. It's me, Mr. Gahan. I've already booked a table at Chanel Pork Restaurant. If it's convenient for you, can we meet now? I'm really in a hurry. Please. When Maiden was practically begging on the other end of the call, it really was like wearing out iron shoes in fruitless searching, only to find it by chance. Just as he was about to sleep, someone brought him a pillow. You should have said that you had booked a table at Chanel. If you had said so, I wouldn't have been driven crazy by this crazy girl, Pin. All right, he had to remind Pin not to order so much meat like he did in the afternoon. She was a woman, so he couldn't be too ruthless. The so-called coincidences always like to gather together. When Gahan arrived at Chanel, the person who came out to greet Gahan was still the same waitress who had guided him in the afternoon. Master Gahan, you're here again. Welcome, welcome. The waitress didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Even though she had earned tens of thousands of RMB in the afternoon, Gahan had cheated others of their money. He was here again in the afternoon. If he dashed and dashed again, then wouldn't she be the one being cheated? But I'm sorry, Master Gahan, you're late again in the afternoon. This time, there aren't many seats left to share. Actually, there are still a few seats that could be shared, but the waitress didn't plan on greeting Gahan anymore. It's fine, it's fine. This time, I have an appointment. May I ask where Miss Maiden's reservation is? Gahan smiled. He didn't know what the waitress was thinking. Miss Maiden? Let me check. The waitress checked on her personal terminal. Sure enough, there was a reservation made by Miss Maiden. It seemed like this dashing and dashing wouldn't happen. The waitress let out a sigh of relief and led Gahan to the table when Maiden had reserved. Gahan glanced at the woman. My goodness, Gahan's state of mind, which had always been as still as water, was directly stirred up by her. This woman didn't have any makeup on and was very plain. Her oval face didn't have any foundation, but it was still very white and tender. Her lips were plump like cherries, and her nose was as firm as a Greek sculpture. Her black hair was tied up in a freehand style. On her crystal forehead, her beautiful eyebrows were gentle and dignified, and her black and white phoenix eyes were as gentle as water. The combination of such beautiful facial features magnified her beauty by more than one fold. She looked like she was already 35 or 36 years old, but her body and skin were still very delicate and plump. It seemed that every inch of skin could be pinched out of water. Judging from her temperament and dress, this was indeed a charming, beautiful, and impeccable mature woman who was good at maintaining herself. But what didn't match her temperament was that the clothes on her body were very simple. It seemed to be the old style and workmanship of a street stall from 10 years ago. It was hard to imagine that such an upper-class woman would dress so carelessly. It was like the Queen of England suddenly wearing clothes that cost 20 yuan for 3 pieces on Taobao. This woman must have a story. Chapter 93. When Maiden didn't come alone. Just like Gahan, she also brought a little girl. She was about 13 or 14 years old, and she was staring fiercely at Gahan. This girl's eyebrows were basically carved from the same mold as her mother, and she seemed to be the younger version of Maiden. When the two of them sat together, they looked like a pair of sisters. "You must be Mr. Gahan." "Hello, I'm Maiden." Seeing Gu Han's arrival, Maiden hurriedly stood up and held Gu Han's hand. What a pair of smooth and delicate hands. The feeling was like a piece of silk to the touch. "Hello, I'm Gahan. Thank you for spending so much money today." Gahan squeezed out a smile, hoping that Qingpin would give him some face and not let him spend too much money. Mr. Guhan must be joking. "All right, this is my daughter, Xiaoya." "Xiaoya, hurry up and greet Uncle." Compared to Gahan's mother, this girl named Xiaoya seemed to be especially unyielding. She was responsible for staring fiercely at Gahan, as if Gahan was their father's murderer. This was a little awkward. In order to alleviate the awkwardness, Maiden quickly called the waiter over to order. However, when it was time to order, Maiden seemed to be very hesitant. After a long time, she ordered 2 side dishes and a few bowls of rice for herself and her daughter. Then, she handed the menu to Gahan, indicating that Gahan could order whatever he wanted. "Let's have 5 pounds of dompa pork first." After lunch, Qingpin expressed to Gahan that dompa pork was the best, and the other meats were not as good as dompa pork. Considering that Qingpin could eat more than 100 pounds in one meal, Gahan only ordered 5 pounds, which was considered to be very considerate of Maiden. However, when Maiden heard Gahan say 5 pounds, her entire face instantly turned pale, and she couldn't say anything. Her daughter, Xiaoya, was about to jump up and do something. Fortunately, Maiden pressed her down on the chair in time and comforted her softly. It's okay. Mommy still has enough money." Gahan saw all of Maiden's actions. Didn't she say that she still had $1 million? Why did he look so strapped for money? Ms. 1, it's because Qingpin has a big appetite that she ordered so much. If the deal goes through, the cost of this meal will be included in the purchase fee. If not, I'll have Song Hama return it to you in a few days. Although Maiden repeatedly said that it was okay, it was all hers. However, Gahan's words still made Maiden's expression look much better. Even Xiaoya's gaze wasn't as hostile as before. Soon, 10 pounds of dompa pork was sent up. When Qingpin saw the meat, she immediately jumped out of Gahan's nursery bag, sat on the table, and ate the meat in big mouthfuls. This foodie, in just one day, has developed such uncultured behavior. Qingpin's foodie behavior made Maiden and her daughter very surprised, and it also made Gahan feel very embarrassed. He waved his hand. "Forget it, let her be alone. We'll discuss our own matters." Okay, no problem." Maiden nodded repeatedly. She looked for Gahan to solve the citizen problem as soon as possible. "I heard from Song Hama that you have $1 million. Gahan asked first. Maiden hesitated for a moment, then nodded, indicating that she indeed had $1 million. Gahan continued, "Well, since you've always planned to buy the citizen quota, then you must know the price of the black market better than me. There are already more than 20 black market purchases at the price of 600,000 each. This is a market where there's a price, but there's no market. It's not too much for me to take $2 million from the two of you. However, since you've left, Song Hama contacted me through his connections. I'll also agree to consider it. It's not impossible to buy 2 of my quotas with $1 million. However, there are some things that I'd like to clarify. Please ask. Maiden will definitely tell you everything she knows." Wen Meiyun nodded her head vigorously. The 1 million in Gohan's hands was indeed too cheap. There wouldn't be such a shop like this if she missed this opportunity. Okay, first, I'd like to confirm if you have any bad records and contribution points. I don't want to sell my quota to some riffraff who doesn't contribute to humanity and even destroys human society. Gohan drank a mouthful of water. Understood, understood. When Mayin used her personal terminal to touch Gohan's personal terminal, and a long list of information was sent to Gohan's personal terminal. Gohan took a look. This when Mayin indeed didn't have any bad records, and her social contribution points had reached 24,000 points. This was a rather large social contribution point. Although it was still quite far from the 500,000 contribution points required to exchange for a free citizenship quota, it still surpassed 95% of the people in society. Okay, there's no problem with the contribution points. Gohan nodded his head. Although this woman had the temperament of a rich lady, her weak nature was also very obvious. Such a woman indeed didn't seem like a woman who would do bad things. Secondly, I'd like to confirm that you really only have 1 million. Also, you can't have things like fixed properties. I don't want to be foolishly nice. Gohan said straightforwardly. He was afraid that this woman would pretend that she only had 1 million left to deceive his sympathy and save 200,000. This wasn't impossible. Understood, understood. When Mayin touched Gohan's personal terminal again, and Gohan was authorized to enter when Mayun's wallet account. There seemed to be slightly more than 1 million left in it, but it also showed that there were 3 fixed properties under Wen Meiyun's name. However, they were already in the state of being seized and auctioned off. This meant that the bank had already taken back these 3 properties and entered the auction process. The reason for this was probably that the bank had taken them back to pay off the debt. Once the auction ended, these 3 properties would have nothing to do with Wen Meiyun. You guys are bankrupt. Looking at the properties being auctioned, Gohan casually asked. When he saw Wen Meiyun's face stiffen, he didn't ask anymore. Obviously, no one was willing to talk about how they went bankrupt. Third question, and also the last one. I like to ask, why do you guys want to go to the core zone? If it's 1 million, you can live happily in the normal zone until your daughter grows up. However, if you spend all the money and enter the core zone, forget about what you eat, they'll ask you where you live. The cheapest house in the core zone is tens of millions of RMB, and the rent is also tens of thousands of RMB per month. You guys might not be able to afford it. Gohan asked the question in his heart. In his opinion, the core zone was just a little safer. There was no need to sacrifice the quality of life for this little bit of safety. Moreover, this was no longer a question of the quality of life, but whether they could survive or not. Because when Meiyun hesitated for a long time, and finally gritted her teeth and answered, because there are a few men who desperately pester me and my daughter, wanting me to be their mistress. They have a lot of power. We're already bankrupt, and we can't fight them, so I want to move to the core zone. This way, I can avoid their harassment and protect my daughter and me. I see. Gohan nodded. With Wen Meiyun's beauty and the temperament of a mature woman, it would be abnormal if no one harassed her. It seemed that she was indeed a pitiful woman, and he hoped that the core zone could give her the sense of security she wanted. Well, it seems that Miss Wen's situation is indeed very difficult. Although I, Gohan, am not a generous person, I'm not a stingy person either. I promise you, I'll sell the 2 citizenship spots to you for 1 million RMB. Gohan's attitude immediately made Wen Meiyun cry with gratitude. She left her seat, walked to Gohan's side, and held Gohan's hand, saying thank you repeatedly. Other than thank you, she seemed to be unable to find any other words to express the gratitude in her heart. Gohan sent Wen Meiyun back to her seat and smiled. 1 million is not a cheap price. After you enter the core zone, you still need to hurry up and earn money, or else your days in the core zone might be even worse. If there's any trouble, you can contact me. After all, I was the one who brought you in. I can still help with some small matters. Gohan's warm words made Wen Meiyun feel grateful again. Her daughter, Xiaoya, looked at Gohan's eyes without hatred. In fact, her eyes were staring at Qingpin, who was gorging himself, as if saliva was about to flow out uncontrollably. Xiaoya, stop looking, eat. When Meiyan noticed that her daughter's gaze was not right, and hurriedly told her daughter not to do anything rude and to eat obediently. However, a bowl of rice covered with some shredded radish and potato really could not satisfy Xiaoya's appetite. Mom, I want to eat meat, Xiaoya said softly. Xiaoya has not eaten meat for almost a year. Xiaoya will only eat one piece of meat. Just a taste will be enough. When Meiyun heard this, she felt sour. Her daughter was raised as the daughter of a rich family, but now she could not even eat a piece of meat. She did not know how she felt in her heart. Xiaoya's words were heard by Gahan. This girl was quite pitiful. Gahan thought for a while, then forcefully pulled a piece of dompa pork from Qingpin's plate that Qingpin had not touched and put it into the girl's bowl. Eat, this piece of meat is on brother's treat. Thank you, brother, the girl said sweetly, then quickly sent the meat into her mouth, chewing it in big mouthfuls. While chewing, she muttered, the chef here makes dompa pork so sweet that my teeth are falling off. My mom's cooking is 10,000 times better than his. This child, eating from her own bowl and still trying to sell the chef, serves her right to not eat meat for a year. Mr. Gahan, my daughter is lacking in manners. When Meiyun showed an apologetic expression to Gahan, but Gahan waved his hand, Madam, when you eat too, this meal is on me. Just add it to the 1 million. It's okay, eat. Seeing that the atmosphere between the two sides was getting friendlier and the story was about to end with a relatively perfect ending, an accident happened. Boss, it's here. I saw that woman and her daughter approaching here. Wow, you have the money to eat Chanel, but no money to pay the bill. Brothers, follow me. Let's kill this shameless woman. A large group of brawny men in disheveled clothes rushed into the Chanel store with wooden sticks and iron rods in their hands, startling all the diners. This group of people's target was very obvious. It was Meiyun. Chapter 94. That's her. That's right, that's her. Long Mei-er's wife. She's Long Mei-er's wife. The group of roughly 10 youngsters holding various kinds of simple sticks and weapons rushed to the table where Gahan and Meiyun were sitting. One of the leaders pointed at Meiyun's head and shouted, Bitch, you have the money to eat Chanel, but you don't have the money to pay us back? I've finally caught you today. Pay us back, pay us back. The leader of the group was the first to shout. Shortly after, the youngsters following behind him began to return the money, berating Meiyun in an overbearing manner. Meiyun was so scared that her face turned pale. Hugging her daughter, she shrunk to the wall and pressed herself against it. She wished that a hole would suddenly appear on the wall and let her out. What are you doing? What are you doing? Do you know where this place is? Get out. All of you get out. The manager of the Chanel store reacted very quickly and rushed over with a few security guards armed with electric batons. They were a subsidiary of the world's 8th-ranked sect, the Hongshan sect. Although they might not be able to do as they please in Yuzhong City, they could at least do as they pleased. A bunch of country bumpkins actually dared to behave atrociously in their store. Were they tired of living? There were more than 10 youngsters in the group, and every one of them was armed with weapons. They did not know how powerful Chanel's backing was and naturally would not be intimidated by a few security guards. They even thought that the security guards were hired by Meiyun to deal with them. They immediately turned around and glared fiercely at the security guards. Both sides were on the verge of breaking out. Tianlei, stop right now. All of you stop. At the crucial moment, an old man who looked to be in his 70s rushed to the side of the group of youngsters and gave a slap to the leader of the group. You little brat, who gave you the permission to cause trouble outside? Don't you know that this is the place of the Hongshan sect? How many lives do you have to cause trouble here? The old man first scolded his own people, and then said to the manager with an old face, Sir, you don't know, this group of young people are used to staying outside the city. They don't understand the rules in the city. They don't know. For the sake of my old face, don't bother with them. They only acted on impulse. They're people from outside the city. Gohan, who was looking on coldly from the side, was shocked. Those who could make a living outside the city, where Yuan Ko was wreaking havoc, were definitely not easy to deal with. However, they rarely had conflicts with the people in the city. This Maiden looked like someone who had always stayed in the city. How could she have offended someone from outside the city? Humph. Seeing that you are an old man, I will remember this matter for the time being. Now throw all the sticks in your hands into the dustbin and get the hell out of Chanel. Now that the manager had gained face, he was no longer unreasonable. He was not like some novels where the power behind him could not wait to torture the other party's entire family for such a small matter. This won't do. We're leaving. What if this woman runs away? The leader of the group shouted. The old man knocked on his head again. I told you to shut up. Sir, you may not know this, but this kid is owed hundreds of thousands of RMB. He finally caught the person, so he impulsively barged in. You're also a big shot, so you should know the pain of U.S. outsiders. Without this money, we can't even survive. Please be kind and let us do something here. Don't worry, I promise you that we will not do anything, nor will we destroy any property in the store. Otherwise, we will compensate you tenfold. When the old man spoke, the wrinkles on his face were all written together. He looked very miserable. In that case, the manager hesitated for a moment. If it is just a negotiation and not a fight, I can't stop you. But you're not allowed to have so many people here. Only 2 people are allowed to come down. The rest of you get out. Stay 100 meters away from our store and wait. Don't affect our business. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. The old man bowed again and again, then whispered a few words to the rest of the group. They simply left Chanel, leaving the old man and the leader Tian Long behind. Mrs. Long, we meet again. Sorry, I was a bit rash this time, but you have also hidden from us for 3 months. We had no choice but to rush in. The old man said to Maiden. Although most of the scary-looking young people had left, leaving only the 2 of them, Maiden still maintained the posture of holding her daughter in the corner. She lowered her head and didn't say a word. Seeing Maiden's reaction, the old man couldn't help but sigh. He kicked the still angry Wang Tianlei's leg. Kneel, the old man said. What? Wang Tianlei looked at the old man in disbelief. Dad, what did you call me for? Wang Tianlei, a strong man in his 20s, actually called this old man in his 70s dad. Could it be that this old man had a son when he was old? I told you to kneel. After the old man finished speaking, he directly knelt on the ground and scolded Wang Tianlei. Your dad, I have already kneeled. You bastard, why are you still not kneeling? Dad, why do we have to kneel for this stinky woman who owes money and doesn't return it? Phone air still. I told you to kneel. Do you hear me? The old man scolded him heavily. Wang Tianlei had no choice but to follow the old man and kneel in front of Gahan and Maiden. This scene made Gahan feel very interesting. At first, when this group of people rushed over, Gahan thought they were a group of scum who coveted Maiden's beauty. Later, he found out that this group of people came to Maiden to return the money. As the saying goes, it is natural to return the money owed. However, it never occurred to Gahan that this group of people, who obviously had the advantage in strength and morality, actually took the initiative to kneel in front of a weak woman like Maiden. There must be a lot of things in it. A lot of things that Maiden didn't tell him just now. In this way, Gahan had to reconsider whether to sell the quota to Maiden or not. At least before figuring out the actual situation, Gahan didn't plan to sell it. Gahan, what are these 2 people doing? Why are they kneeling on the ground? Do they owe us meat? Little crocodile Qingpin, who stuffed the last piece of dompa meat into his mouth, found that there were 2 people kneeling beside him. He curiously asked Gahan, Oh, I was wondering where Mrs. Long was hiding. Boss Long's body is not cold yet, and you did this kind of thing. You really made Boss Long proud. Wang Tianlei, who was forced to kneel on the ground by his father, was in a bad mood. After seeing the existence of Gahan, his stomach was suddenly full of jealousy, and he spurted it towards Gahan. Believe it or not, I will cut off your mouth. Gu Hongxi replied slowly, but the killing intent in his tone made Yi Tianlong involuntarily shudder. This person has seen blood on his body. This kind of person can't be provoked. Wang Tianlei's experience of living outside the city for more than 10 years told him this fact. Don't talk nonsense, Mr. Gu, and I didn't do that kind of dirty thing you think, and I didn't do anything wrong to my husband. When Maiden finally no longer remained silent, She will not allow her reputation to be insulted. Mrs. Long, you are finally willing to speak. That's good. There is no evidence. I, Wang Tianlei, will not say anything. Now I, Wang Tianlei, kneel in front of you. Do a good deed and return the 800,000 yuan you owe us. I will kowtow to you 10 times, okay? My sister Feng Yer is still waiting for this money to save her life. 800,000 more. Wen Meiyun was also angry, but in her anger, she looked especially weak. Didn't I already give you 600,000? Now all of my husband's property has been sold. The 3 properties have also been repossessed by the bank. Where do I have 800,000 yuan to give you? Wen Meiyun clearly still had 1 million yuan in her card, something that Gohan could clearly see. Although Gohan did not point this out, his evaluation of Wen Meiyun in his heart had worsened. Mrs. Long, it's true that you gave us 600,000 yuan, but that 600,000 yuan is still not enough to pay for the lives of my 3 brothers. Now, my sister is lying in the hospital, and she urgently needs to have surgery to regenerate her limbs. If this drags on, my sister's limbs will never recover. As he spoke, a few hot tears rolled down from the eyes of the man, Wang Tianlei. After a series of conversations between Wang Tianlei and Wen Meiyun, Gohan gradually restored the truth of the matter. It turned out that Wen Meiyun's husband, Long Mei-er, had opened up a pork breeding base outside the city, and had even hired Wang Tianlei and the other unafraid outsiders to guard the equipment and domestic pigs in the breeding base. In the first few years, everything was peaceful, and Long Mei had even earned quite a bit of money, allowing Wen Meiyun and her daughter to live a happy life. However, there are unpredictable winds and clouds in the sky, and people have their ups and downs. Opening a breeding base outside the city was originally an extremely risky matter. Although the sword bearers within a 50 kilometers radius of the city had more or less cleared out the Yuan Ko, there would still be the occasional Yuan Ko. Occasionally, there would be Yuan Ko who would sneak into the vicinity of the city and attack the humans working outside the city. Therefore, these outsiders were using their lives to exchange for money. When Long Mei had first opened up the breeding base, she had specially considered this point. Therefore, she had specially taken out a huge loan from the bank to purchase extremely advanced unmanned breeding security equipment. With only 5 people, they were able to control the entire operation of the pig farm. 1 year ago, due to the equipment malfunctioning, Long Mei had brought the technical specialist sent by the equipment manufacturer to the breeding base to repair the equipment. However, a sad thing happened. While the equipment was being repaired, Long Mei-er's breeding base was attacked by a group of Yuan Ko. When the nearby sword bearers received the alarm and rushed to the breeding base, Long Mei-er and 3 other people were already corpses on the spot. There was also a girl in charge of cooking, who had both her hands and feet eaten by Yuan Ko. Fortunately, she did not die. The equipment in the breeding base was also destroyed into a complete mess by Yuan Ko, turning into a pile of scrap metal. Due to the fact that the equipment was bought with a loan from the bank, all of Long Mei-er's assets were sealed off by the bank on the same day. After an auction, all of it was used to repay the bank loan, leaving only roughly 100,000 yen in Wen Meiyun's hands. However, this was only enough to repay the bank loan. The compensation for the 3 dead outsiders still fell on Wen Meiyun's head. Wen Meiyun gathered the things that she had brought from her family and the money in Long Mei-er's little treasury together, leaving a total of 1,600,000 yen. The death of the 3 outsiders was easy to deal with. With a compensation of 200,000 yen per person recommended by the council, Wen Meiyun had already paid 600,000 yen to the families of the 3 dead people in just a few days. However, the troublesome one was the one who had her limbs bitten off, Yi Tianlong's younger sister. Wang Tianlei insisted on giving his sister a surgery to regenerate her limbs. It was a very expensive surgery fee. 800,000 yuan was just the surgery fee, and the post-treatment fees would add up to at least 1 million yuan. Therefore, Yi Tianlong only asked Wen Meiyun for 800,000 yuan, which was still a bit of conscience. After knowing the entire story, Gohan no longer had any interest in Wen Meiyun's involvement in this matter. He clearly still had 1 million yen in his card. Could it be that the two citizenship quotas could not compare to the limbs of a lady? Madam One, please take your time to deal with these matters. Let's end the deal between us. This meal is on me. Goodbye. Guhan carried Qingpin back into the pouch on his chest before swaggering off. How can this be? Seeing Gahan leave without even turning his head back, when Miyun's entire body softened as she slumped into her seat. Hey, Son Hama, lend me 10,000 renminbi. I'll return it to you after I've sold all the equipment in the game. Guhan walked away in a carefree and unrestrained manner. However, he appeared to be extremely helpless when it came to settling the bill. Chapter 95. By the time Gahan reached home, the lights were already lit. It was almost 7 o'clock in the evening. Upon entering the house, a large pile of bags was neatly arranged in Gahan's home. These were the clothes that he bought at the clothing building this afternoon. 1,000 years later, logistics had already developed to the extreme. If you place an order on the spot, it could be delivered to your doorstep within 2 hours. If it was a government enterprise like the clothing building, even if you weren't at home, it could be delivered directly to your home. It was unknown whether this was a good thing for the masses or a bad thing for the loss of privacy. As soon as he reached home, Gohan sent the greasy Qingpin to take a shower. Then, Gohan very considerately placed the newly bought underwear and pajamas at the bathroom door. After that, he practiced his swordsmanship in the living room for a while. Qingpin's shower speed was very fast. After a shower, Qingpin chased Gahan out of the living room. It couldn't be helped. The popular cartoon Calabash Brothers was about to start broadcasting. Last night, Qingpin was addicted to this cartoon. He completely dominated the online television in the living room and watched dozens of episodes of Calabash Brothers. Today, he caught up with a daily update. Guhan, who had been chased out of the living room, refreshed the game forum out of boredom. In the end, he was shocked to find that although a few days had passed, the discussion about the Admiral on the forum was getting more and more heated, especially the discussion thread on how the player, the Admiral, had completed the dungeon within an hour. There were hundreds of posts every minute. When Gahan saw this post, the entire post had reached the level of 1 million replies. Only then did Gahan believe what Mingwe said in the afternoon. Someone was willing to pay 30,000 renminbi for his first interview. Only 30,000 renminbi? Is my asking price a little too low? Gahan suddenly thought of this. Soon, an idea popped into Gahan's mind. Since my first guide is so valuable, wouldn't I earn a lot of money by opening a paid post to sell the guide? Gahan did as he thought of it. However, he didn't intend to use his main account to post. This was because Gahan's main account was maxed out in the forum and had published many excellent guides. Therefore, Gahan's main account was quite famous in the forum. Once he used this account, the influence would be too great. At the very least, his forum's Big Shots QQ group would completely explode. Therefore, Gahan chose to apply for a SMUF account called Military Governor 12580 to post. There was no other way. The names Military Governor and Military Governor 12579 had already been applied. Gahan could only follow the system's suggestion and use the name Military Governor 12580. After spending about 3 hours, Military Governor wrote down the entire King of Yu's Gojian sword strategy in detail. He carefully corrected the text a few times and deleted some information that Gahan couldn't pass through. For example, he didn't choose the original sword lady, but used the Qingpin sword. Another example was killing Fleeting Calendar to obtain the King of Yu's Gojian sword. In fact, the reason why Gahan could complete the dungeon in an hour, other than heading to Honest Supermarket at the beginning and some acceleration details, was mainly because of Guhan's powerful combat ability as a swordmaster. He wouldn't waste a lot of time because King of Yu had forgotten his swordsmanship. Therefore, Gahan specially pointed out in the post that his method required him to have powerful swordsmanship skills. He also created a few moves that were very effective against Wild Wolf and Steel Tooth for players to learn. For players like Liu Ling who were in the ancient martial arts circle, it could indeed greatly increase their time. However, ordinary players wouldn't gain much from this post. At most, they would know how to escape the ruins and reach Honest Supermarket's entrance in a minute. It was impossible for them to learn the moves that Gahan had created on the spot in a short period of time. Of course, most players had already passed the King of Yu's Gojian Sword Dungeon and couldn't enter it a second time. Therefore, they were only curious about how Military Governor could get there in an hour. They just wanted to know the method. Whether they could do it or not did not mean much to them. After confirming that there were no problems for the last time, Gahan named the post, "I'm Military Governor. I'll explain how to get an SSS rating." Then he set a fee of 5 renminbi to read the post and officially posted the post. As the internet was under bat surveillance, once there was a pirated version of Gahan's post, it would immediately be seized by bat and fined. Therefore, Gahan wasn't worried about piracy. However, the post that Gahan had imagined would be flooded with clicks and money would not appear. This was normal. A post by a level 1 smurf account like Gahan looked like a title clicker. Moreover, it was a F*King title clicker. Who would be interested in spending money to click on such a post? Therefore, naturally, this post was drowned in the sea of posts and did not make a single ripple. It was already 9 o'clock at night when Gahan finished typing the post. Under normal circumstances, Gahan was the kind of night owl who wouldn't sleep until 2 o'clock the next morning. However, he wanted to sleep early today because at that moment, Qingpin was already wearing cute spotted dog pajamas, lying on Gahan's bed and snoring loudly. Gahan's house was relatively small. There was only one bed. Gahan definitely didn't intend to let Qingpin sleep on his bed. Seeing Qingpin sleeping sweetly and adorably, Gahan quietly went to bed and hugged Qingpin's petite body in his arms. For the entire afternoon, Qingpin had been in his arms. Now that it was gone all of a sudden, he was still not used to it. Gahan had a dreamless night. When Gahan opened his eyes, it was already the morning of the next day. Qingpin, who was in his arms, was nowhere to be found. However, from the sound of Vixen die in the living room, Qingpin should have woken up early to watch the Calabash Brothers. But that's not right. The Calabash Brothers is not broadcast in the morning. Gahan was too lazy to think about why. He turned on his computer and looked at his smurf account's post. Still, no one replied. This made Gahan a little depressed. When he was about to post something and manually push the post up, there was suddenly a knock on the door. Who is it? Is it Song Hama? Gahan walked into the living room and asked through the door. Dear Lord Gahan, we are a moving company under the service center for sword bearers. Your house in the core area has been prepared. We are here to help you move. Only then did Gahan remember that on the day he became a sword bearer, he had indeed received a message to arrange a house in the core area. From this, it could be seen that the resources of the entire human society were heavily invested in the sword bearers. A house in the core area that ordinary people would need tens of millions to buy would be directly given to a new sword bearer, regardless of the cost. However, the voice of the moving company outside the door sounded a little familiar. When he opened the door, it was none other than Wang Tianlei, who had come to collect a debt from Maiden last night. You're a sword bearer. Wang Tianlei recognized Gahan at first glance. He was scared out of his wits. He had actually slandered a sword bearer yesterday. No wonder he said that he would cut off his mouth with a sword. According to the law, slandering a sword bearer in public was a fair punishment. All right, I don't hold a grudge against you. If you want to please me, hurry up and help me move all my things to the new house. Gahan saw Wang Tianlei's fear and patted him on the shoulder, giving him a reassuring pill. Yes, Wang Tianlei saluted and immediately called for the rest of the movers to come in. They started moving all kinds of luggage and furniture for Gahan very quickly. According to Gahan's request, the furniture contained traces of his parents. They had to be moved to their new house without leaving a single piece behind. On the way, Gahan chatted with Wang Tianlei from time to time. Aren't you from outside the city? How did you get into the moving company in the city? Sir, I also want to work outside the city. Although it's a little dangerous, the pay is high. It's at least 10 times higher than the movers. However, my sister is now in the hospital, and only my father is taking care of her. I'm afraid that the old man can't take it. so I returned to the city to work. I can earn money while taking care of the two of them. How did your discussion go yesterday? Did Madam Wen compensate you in the end? Gahan initially decided not to ask this question. However, when he thought of Wen Meiyun's depressed face, he could not help but ask. Well, we went to the hospital with her in the end and saw my sister. Mrs. Long saw my sister's miserable appearance, but she still gave us 800,000 for the operation fee. My sister can have the operation next week. When Wang Tianlei said this, his expression was very sunny and excited. Obviously, his sister's rescue made him come out of the gloom. However, Mrs. Long seems to have been pushed too hard by us. When she went back from the hospital, she almost jumped out of the window. Now that I think about it, maybe I should have only asked for 600,000. Our father still has some savings. He can grit his teeth and pay another 200,000. When Wang Tianlei said this, he felt a little uneasy in his heart. He was really afraid that Wen Meiyun would take things too hard and commit suicide. Then, this person's life would be on his shoulders. Does she want to commit suicide? Gahan muttered. It could be seen that Wen Meiyun loved her daughter very much. Even if the 1 million was compensated for 800,000, she still had 200,000 left. She would not be desperate. If she spent 200,000 sparingly, it should not be a big problem for her daughter to grow up. Could it be that this Wen Meiyun has other hidden secrets? Forget it. There are many miserable people in the world. Can I care about them all? Let's go back to our own homes. Chapter 96. Gohan's new home was in a district called Sankingshan in the east of the core zone. It was Block 15, Block B, Room 601. All the districts in the core zone that were named after the mountains of Huaxia were standard districts built by the Sword Committee for the sword bearers. They were all built in the style of the ancient times from 1,000 years ago. At first glance, the style of the 21st century was obvious. The housing area allocated to the sword bearers was 288 square meters. Until now, people still did not quite understand why this number was chosen. They only knew that this number was decided by Sir Kanzu. Perhaps it contained some shocking secret. Hence, the later generations built according to this mysterious number. Compared to Gahan's previous honeycomb house, which was no more than 30 square meters, this 88 square meter superhouse included 4 bedrooms with full bathrooms, 2 living rooms, a separate dining room, a servant's room, 2 kitchens, a fitness room, a chess room, a storage room, and a central control room. It was like heaven. Moreover, when Gahan moved in, he found that all the decorations, appliances, and network equipment were available. The central control room was especially noteworthy. Not only could it monitor the situation of the entire house, but it also had a quantum teleportation system that had been developed less than a few decades ago. This system could directly teleport the sword bearers to the central teleportation hall of the Sword Bearers Service Center through quantum technology. Then, through the central teleportation hall, they could be teleported to more than 100 teleportation points in the urban area of Yuzhong Base. When there was a major attack, the sword bearers in Yuzhong City could be transported to every corner of the city as quickly as possible to protect the entire city. Unfortunately, this system was completed 8 years ago. If it had been completed 12 years ago, perhaps Gahan's parents would not have died. When Wang Tianlei and the movers moved Gahan's old house into his new home, Gahan sadly found that these things seemed to be out of place no matter where they were placed. Gahan was not the kind of person who was nostalgic to the point of being inflexible. He did not ask the movers to replace these antiques with new furniture. Instead, he silently sent these antiques into the storage room. He could take a look at them when he missed them. 4 bedrooms. Gahan glanced at the 4 splendidly decorated bedrooms. The largest one among them, with a small living room, should be his master bedroom, and the other 3 should be the side bedrooms. Yesterday, her house was too small. She and Qing Pin could only squeeze into 1 bedroom. There was nothing she could do about it. But now that he had 4 bedrooms, he should give Qing Pin a bedroom. After all, Qing Pin was a girl, and, as the saying goes, men and women should not touch each other. Gahan silently pondered. He didn't know why, but when he thought that he couldn't hug Qing Pin to sleep, he suddenly felt uncomfortable. Qingpin, pick one of these 4 bedrooms. In the end, Gahan still decided to let Qingpin live alone. He still had a deep hatred that he had yet to take revenge, so how could he worry about love affairs? Wait, why did it have to be related to love affairs? He was not a Lilicon. Pick one. Qingpin poked her head out of Gahan's pouch and looked around the bedrooms. She pointed to the largest master bedroom and said, Gohan, Qingpin wants that one. Okay, I'll give it to you. Gohan readily agreed. He didn't have any obsession with the master bedroom. Then I want that one. Gahan pointed to the bedroom next to the master bedroom and said, Then Qingpin doesn't want the big one. Qingpin wants the one that Gahan just chose. Who knew that when she heard Gahan choose another one, Qingpin immediately changed her mind and took the one that Gahan chose. Gohan touched his head, a little puzzled, but since Qingpin liked it, he gave it to her and chose the big master bedroom again. However, when she heard that Gahan wanted the master bedroom, Qingpin actually changed her mind and followed Gahan and took the master bedroom. After going back and forth several times, Gahan was a little unhappy and asked, Qingpin, which one do you want? Do you want all 4 of them? Qingpin wants to live with Gahan. Unexpectedly, Gahan, who thought that Qingpin was playing with him, never thought that she actually had this idea. Qingpin actually wanted to live with him, so she kept choosing the bedroom that he chose. With such a sword lady, what else could he ask for? No, what else could he ask for? Qingpin, the 2 of us will live together in the future. Gohan touched Qingpin's small head that almost reached his chin and said emotionally, Gohan, we will be together forever. Ugh, it was really a very touching scene. If Wang Tianlei did not appear behind Gahan with an expression as if he had seen a ghost, it would have been impossible. That, Lord Gahan, I've put the things away for you. If there's nothing else, we'll go back. Wang Tianlei said awkwardly. Oh, thank you. Gohan nodded. Since you're done, why don't you leave? Why are you still standing here? You're welcome, you're welcome. Wang Tianlei bowed and suddenly thought of something. He added, Oh yes, when I came, the Sword Committee asked me to inform you that before tonight, please go to the Maid Service Center of the Swordsman Service Center to collect your exclusive maid. I didn't expect Lord Gahan to be such a person. Wang Tianlei thought to himself and left Gahan's new home. However, deep down in his heart, he clearly had a deeper understanding of the solid cold. Exclusive maid? Gohan recalled that the Sword Committee did have such a benefit. In order to let the swordsmen fight and train their strength wholeheartedly, they would assign a maid to the swordsman in real life to take care of the swordsman's chores. Moreover, the Sword Committee would be responsible for all the expenses of the maid, and the swordsman only needed to enjoy it. Compared to the 288 square meter house in the core area, the exclusive maid seemed to be more popular among the swordsmen. It was said that these maids were all above average beauties. They had received professional maid training and were proficient in all kinds of domestic and physiological services. That's right, these maids were also proficient in physiological services. Moreover, according to the maid contract they signed, they had to fully cooperate with the master's physiological needs and listen to the master's commands without any resistance. Otherwise, they would be immediately disqualified and lose this lucrative job. It sounded a little unbelievable. The Sword Committee, the official organization of the swordsmen, was actually doing this kind of work like a pimp? Was this still a normal government organization? In fact, the Sword Committee also had its own difficulties. Half of the swordsmen were young men full of vigor and vitality. Staying with the beautiful sword lady every day, it was inevitable that something should not have happened. If the sword lady herself was willing and the swordsman was in love with each other, then forget it. But if the sword lady had no feelings for the swordsman, but was forcibly XXO by the swordsman, then it would be a very serious accident. If it was light, the sword lady would automatically cut off the sword mark between her and the swordsman and return to a state of eternal sleep. And these sword ladies who had been so insulted were very likely to refuse to synchronize with all the swordsmen in the future. According to the records, There were already more than 300 natural sword ladies who had not synchronized with any swordsman for hundreds of years because they were forced to exexo by the swordsman. If it was more serious, it would be like what Yi Xian wanted to do before. These insulted sword ladies would even kill their swordsmen, and the two would perish together. In the beginning, the Sword Committee thought of a lot of ways and made a lot of laws stipulating that this kind of behavior was a crime punishable by death. Although it had some effect, it could not fundamentally eliminate this kind of situation. Every year, there would be unafraid swordsmen who committed crimes against the wind. And in this way, the strong style of the Sword Committee made the relationship between the Sword Committee and the swordsmen very bad. It was like 1,000 years ago, the opposite feeling between the city management and the peddlers. Later, a certain Sword Committee member who read the myth of Yu the Great's flood slapped his head and proposed a solution. Simply put, those swordsmen were all lustful, and it was unrealistic to want to suppress their desires. It was better to let them vent, as long as the object of their venting was not their sword lady. The Sword Committee could have arranged for some beautiful, ordinary women to let them vent their desires. In this way, not only did it solve the problem of the swordsmen forcing XXOO, their own sword lady, the key was to ease the relationship between the swordsmen and the Sword Committee and even turn the originally negative relationship into a positive one. It was like a peddler setting up a stall on the side of the street, and the city management took the initiative to invite them to open their own shop in a high-class shopping mall with a rent of tens of thousands per month. In any case, the monthly expenses of these maids were not much, at least not as much as the funds of the discipline committee. As a result, the exclusive maid program was perfectly and rapidly promoted among the swordsmen, not only creating a great reputation for the Sword Committee, but also effectively reducing the occurrence of forced XXO. Until now, it has been decades since a sword lady had been forced to XXO by a swordsman. Casually speaking, female swordsmen could only receive a maid, not a male servant. The relationship was too chaotic, and it could not be explained in a short time. In the evening, Gohan appeared alone in the maid service center of the Swordsman Service Center. Although Qingpin wanted to come over, under the temptation of the complete collection of Shuck and Beta, he obediently sat in the living room and watched cartoons, allowing Gohan to sneak out by himself. "Master, welcome to the Maid Service Center." At the entrance of the Maid Service Center, outside a building that looked like a coffee shop, 2 rows of slender and elegant maids saw Gohan's arrival and uniformly bowed, revealing their full cleavage, welcoming Gohan's arrival with coquettish voices. Chapter 97. For every maid in the maid service center waiting for their master to select them, every moment was filled with apprehension. They hoped that they would be selected and receive a high maid's salary, or be promoted to become the wife or wife of the sword bearer and live a superior life. However, they were also afraid. They were afraid that they would encounter an ugly, wretched, or old master. They were even more afraid of encountering a master with perverted sexual interests. Such cases were not uncommon. Many of the maids with expectations left with their masters. A few months later, they were returned to the maid service center with wounds all over their bodies. They were all subjected to unimaginable abuse, and their bodies and minds were greatly damaged. Some even committed suicide by jumping off a building after returning. In this regard, the Sword Bearer Service Center only compensated these maids with a sum of money, and the public opinion would not be affected. As long as human society still relied on sword bearers to maintain, then the ordinary people in this world would have to endure such treatment until they or their descendants gave birth to a sword bearer. In the waiting room of the Maid Service Center, Wen Meiyun was particularly conspicuous. Among a large group of 18 or 19-year-old girls, the 35-year-old Wen Meiyun seemed out of place and was isolated in a corner. Although all the maid candidates were carefully sizing up this perfect mature woman who suddenly joined, no one took the initiative to talk to Wen Meiyun. The head maid must be crazy. She actually let such an old woman in as a maid. I'm afraid this woman is no longer a virgin, right? Will the sword bearer masters like her? Hee hee. Not only is she not a virgin, I'm afraid she even has a child. TSK, TSK. She's so old, and she's still a maid. How shameless. I'm guessing she must have bribed the head maid. She hasn't even studied at the maid school, and doesn't even have a maid certificate. These noisy discussions made when Maiden unable to even raise her head. All she could do was bury her face in her wrist and let her tears flow freely. All right, all of you shut up. Have you all forgotten the 8 rules of serving a maid? A middle-aged maid who was about the same age as when Maiden walked into the waiting room. The moment she opened her mouth, she berated them, and the messy waiting room immediately quietened down. The 8 rules of serving a maid were the golden rules set by the legendary head maid, 16 Nights. It was a maid's secret manual that every maid had to memorize. However, there were rumors that 16 Nights was actually not a human, but a female Yuan Ko who played games. Later, she met Jitian Jindi and fell in love with him. Then, she concealed her identity and became Jitian Jindi's maid. She was also responsible for training the first batch of maids in the Sword Council. Up until the death of the Heaven-Shrouding Sword Emperor, 16 Nights, who had followed the Heaven-Shrouding Sword Emperor for more than 30 years, not only did her appearance not change, but she also disappeared without a trace after the death of the Heaven-Shrouding Sword Emperor. No matter what the legend was, 16 Nights was the legend of the maids. The rules she set were the iron rules that all maids had to follow. The first iron rule of the 8 rules of serving was, Master doesn't ask, maid doesn't speak. Master's orders are to be obeyed. In extension, if the master didn't speak, the maid should always keep quiet. Obviously, the scene of the discussion about when Maiden had violated the maid rules. The middle-aged maid snorted coldly. Now that there are 2 honorable sword bearers outside, it's time to show your beautiful appearance, perfect figure, and obedient service to your future master. Now, 6 people in a group, all line up, go out and perform on the glass tea stage. If anyone messes up, go back to the maid school and repeat for another year. Yes, head maid. After the maids saluted, they automatically lined up in 5 rows, ready to accept the master's selection. However, when Maiden didn't move, she still shrank in her position, buried her head, and shivered. The stern head maid saw this, but she didn't get angry. Instead, she walked to Maiden with a sympathetic expression and handed her a cup of tea. Take it, drink it, and your spirit will be much better. Hearing the voice of the head maid, Maiden revealed her tear-stained eyes. She reluctantly smiled at the head maid, then took the tea and took a sip. You added luohan fruit in it? This cup of water is not cheap. Your tongue is still so powerful, the head maid exclaimed, and immediately, she was a little puzzled. I didn't expect that you would come back here. You've already left this world. Why did you come back? I was shocked when I saw the application, just now. I thought someone had the same name as you, but I didn't expect it to be you. I also didn't expect that I would come back here. When Maiden sighed, the world is like a game of chess. It's not up to us poor women. As long as I have a glimmer of hope, I don't want to come back here. This place is actually quite good. The salary is high, and no one can control me. I don't even want to leave here. The head maid replied. Actually, Sujin, I also didn't expect that you would still be here. It's been 15 years, and you still haven't found your master. You were the 2nd graduate in the whole school, and your appearance is not inferior to mine. Why bother to stay here? Everyone has their own difficulties. The head maid named Sujin was obviously unwilling to talk about her situation. Since you are here, it means that you have made up your mind to find new master. For a second-hand maid like you, our center is not obliged to pay you 20% of the salary. Speaking of this, Sujin paused. Although I really want to give it to you, this is the rule, and I can't violate it. Don't worry, since I have decided to come back. I have already planned to sell myself again. Meiden's words were obviously insincere. Otherwise, she would not have stayed in her seat and not moved, but would have followed the young female servants to the tea stage to choose for the 2 sword bearers. As you wish. Sujin obviously saw that Maiden was in a state of entanglement and hesitation, and that she had not really made up her mind. However, she would not force her good friend. As the head maid of Yuzhong City, she still had this power. The 2 old friends talked for a while about the things of the past. Wen Meiyun's body obviously relaxed, and her mood became a lot more cheerful. At this time, Su Jin, who was talking to Wen Meiyun, frowned. What? How could this be? What's wrong? What happened? Wen Meiyun asked curiously. What else could it be? It's that group of masters who are difficult to serve. Su Jin shook her head helplessly. Just now, there were 30 maids, but none of them were chosen by the two sword-bearers. There were obviously a few maids with very high quality, and I don't know what kind of maids they want. Forget it. I told them to wait for a few days and wait for the new maid to graduate from the school, then come back to choose. These sword-bearers are more and more difficult to serve. Su Jin sighed. Not being able to choose a satisfactory maid was more or less an accident. She reckoned that she would look a lot worse on her year-end attendance test. I'll go. Suddenly, when Meiyun stood up, you go. Su Jin was a little hesitant and also a little reluctant. Have you really thought it through? Once you take this step, there's really no turning back. I have long been unable to turn back. When Meiyun shook her head, put on a standard maid's walking posture, and gracefully left the room. The tea stage was a place for the sword-bearers to choose their own maids. At a glance, it seemed that there was no difference from the tea stage of 1,000 years ago. The maids wore standard maid costumes, walked on the tea stage, and showed their bodies to the sword-bearers below the stage. The only difference was that both sides of the tea stage were completely enclosed by one-way glass. The so-called one-way glass meant that only one side could see the situation on the other side of the glass. For example, now, only the two sword-bearers outside the tea stage could see the maids on the tea stage, and the maids inside the tea stage couldn't see anything outside. At this moment, Gohan and another sword-bearer sat on the chairs opposite the tea stage, silently watching the maids walk by one by one. In Gohan's hand, there was an exquisite booklet on which the basic information of each maid was printed. For example, the maid who walked by now. Name, Huang Shan. Age, 19. Graduation result, A figure, A appearance, A appearance, A serving, A handicraft, A housework, A cooking, C education, B nurturing, B management, C comments. Appearance and figure are the best choice, especially in the field of handicraft and housework. It can take care of every detail of the family perfectly. However, her cooking and management skills are insufficient, and she is suitable to be a housekeeping maid. Her serving skills are very strong, especially with her mouth. To be honest, this maid's data was very good in all aspects, especially her appearance, and serving, which are the most important abilities for sword-bearers. All of them were A-level, and any higher would only be an S-level evaluation. However, there were very few maids who could achieve this evaluation. Many of them were directly booked by sword-bearers born in big families before they even graduated, and they couldn't stay at the maid service center. However, Gohan didn't care about those in front. What he cared about was the maid's cooking skills, especially when it came to cooking meat. Gohan didn't dare to rely on Chanel every day to feed Qing Pin, who was getting pickier and pickier. It was more reliable to hire a maid who was good at cooking. Unfortunately, after 30 maids walked by, not a single one with A-level cooking skills appeared, so Gohan didn't have a choice. However, Gohan didn't know why the sword-bearer beside him didn't make a choice either. Looking at his wretched look, the word lecherous was written all over his face. Among the maids that walked by just now, many of them were A-level in terms of figure, appearance, and service, but this sword-bearer didn't even say a word. As if sensing Gohan's confusion, this sword-bearer turned his head and revealed an ugly smile. I already have a young maid at home, so this time I want a maid with a mature style. Oh, right? I'm already a sword-bearer at the sword level. According to the rules of the Sword Council, every time a sword-bearer's level increased, they would be qualified to receive an additional maid. On the surface, it was said to take better care of the new sword lady, but in reality, it was to improve the Sword Council's impression of the sword-bearer. Sirs, all the candidate maids have appeared. Do you think? The maid beside Gohan paused halfway through her words. I'm sorry, there's only one maid left to be selected. Would the two sirs like to have a look at this maid? Where's the information? Is there no information? Gohan flipped through the information in his hand, but there was only the data of the 30 maids. After hearing the maids' words, Gohan wanted to turn around and leave, but another sword-bearer grabbed his hand and said, "Apologies, this maid has just joined. We haven't had time to prepare the information. Let's take a look. Let's take a look. We won't lose out if we look at one more." The wretched sword-bearer said, "All right." Gohan nodded, sat down, and waited for the last maid to appear. The color of the lights on the T stage instantly changed. Under the beautiful reddish-purple light, a ripe fruit slowly appeared. How could it be her? This was Gohan's first reaction. She seems to be good at cooking meat. This was Gohan's second reaction. That's her. I choose her. This was the wretched sword-bearer who stood up and blurted out. Chapter 98. When Maiden did not expect that the first time she stepped onto the stage after returning here, the entire one-way glass of the stage had fallen. The maid service center had a special description to describe this scene. It was called colorful glazed blossom. This meant that at least one swordsman outside had taken a fancy to her and had chosen her as his exclusive maid. Well, Maiden didn't know why it was like this. In her opinion, she was already 35 years old and belonged to the age of old people. If those youthful and beautiful maidservants weren't chosen, then it was even more impossible for an old woman like her to be chosen. It was precisely because of this thought that when Maiden mustered up the courage to walk onto the stage. Otherwise, she would not have the courage to go up. However, she never expected that she would be chosen just like that. Colorful glazed blossom. When Maiden was not mentally prepared at all, she squatted down and curled herself up, not daring to look outside, especially at the swordsman who had chosen her. Exquisite. Truly exquisite. The wretched swordsman saw when Maiden curl up and immediately clapped his hands excitedly. Regardless of her figure or appearance, she is a perfect mature woman that can be squeezed to the point of juices. However, her temperament is as shy as a young girl's, so her sensitivity to stimulation must be very high. TSK. If she had another daughter, she would be a perfect and impeccable mature woman. Hearing the words of the wretched swordsman, Gohan instinctively took a few steps away from him. This kind of scum. How was he chosen by the sword mistress and synchronized to become a swordsman? Being together with such a person, his image would be almost ruined. Of course, this sentence also reached the ears of Wen Meiyun, who was pretending to be an ostrich, causing her to suddenly lose the strength to support her body. In Wen Meiyun's opinion, the best choice for her was a female swordsman. If it was not a female, a friendly and kind male swordsman was also barely acceptable. However, listening to the vulgar words that the swordsman had just said, not only was he a male swordsman, but he was also a shameless and lewd swordsman. What was more frightening was that he actually coveted her daughter. When Meiyun's legs went soft, and she directly sat down on the stage. Wen Meiyun, what are you doing? Have you forgotten the 8 rules of serving a maid? Stand up and face your master. The head maid, Sujin, also appeared on the tea stage. When she heard that Wen Meiyun had been selected, she rushed to the tea stage immediately and saw Wen Meiyun lying on the ground. Regardless of whether it was her duty as a head maid or the fact that many staff were watching, Sujin had no choice but to put away her pity for her good friend and use a cold tone to remind Wen Meiyun to abide by the maid's rules. Yes, Wen Meiyun did not want to put her friend in a difficult position. She forced herself to stand up, but she was still unwilling to raise her head to look at the perverted swordsman who had chosen her. "Oh, Miss Sujin, we meet again." The wretched swordsman gestured to Sujin, and Sujin gave a 90-degree bow. "Esteemed Lord Li Xian, congratulations on becoming a treasured sword wielder. Welcome to our maid service center once again. I wonder if you're satisfied with the maid Shiko's service?" "Yes, satisfied." Li Xian smiled even more wretchedly. "Actually, I like you more, Miss Sujin. Unfortunately, you've already become the head maid. Otherwise, I would definitely choose you." As the head maid who managed the maid service center, she belonged to the category of maids that ordinary swordsmen could not choose. "Esteemed Lord Li Xian, If you can become a spiritual sword wielder, you can take Sujin away at any time. Sujin's smile was impeccable when she spoke, and her answer seemed to be that she really hoped to be chosen by Li Xian. However, in reality, the meaning of her rejection was very obvious. Li Xian looked like he was almost 40 years old, and he had only become a treasured sword wielder at the age of 40. The probability of him being able to upgrade to a named sword in this lifetime was less than 2%, let alone a spiritual sword. All right, I'll borrow your auspicious words, Miss Sujin. This is Wen Meiyun, right? This made Wen Meiyun, Li Xian, will be taking her away. With that, Li Xian took 2 or 3 steps onto the tea stage, intending to hold Wen Meiyun's hand. Wen Meiyun, who was on the stage, sensed a smell similar to that of salted fish wafting towards her. She had no choice but to raise her head, only to see Li Xian's wretched face, which was as ugly as a garbage heap. She immediately wailed and took a few steps back, avoiding Li Xian's outstretched hand. Why? Is there one of the 8 rules of service for maids that teaches you maids not to listen to their master's orders? Seeing that Wen Meiyun had avoided him, Li Xian's expression turned cold. Since it's your first offense, I'll let it go this time. If you dare to do this again when we return, I'll punish you. With that, Li Xian reached out, intending to hold Wen Meiyun's hand again. Wen Meiyun seemed to have accepted her fate. This time, she did not dodge, but another hand blocked in front of Li Xian. Miss Sujin, what's the meaning of this? Li Xian's expression turned very ugly as he looked at the small hand that was blocking his way. You can't touch her, Lord Li Xian. Sujin said coldly. Are you kidding me? Why can't I touch her? Li Xian shouted loudly, spitting saliva all over Sujin's face. Lord Li Xian, according to the rules of our maid service center, unless you're the maid's master, you're absolutely not allowed to touch any part of the maid's body. Sujin completely ignored the saliva on her face and replied calmly. What did you say? Am I not the maid's master? Li Xian looked as if he had seen a ghost. He was in disbelief. Yes, you're not the maid Wen Meiyun's master. Sujin's face was filled with a sweet smile. That's impossible. I clearly said that I wanted her at the first moment. So she's mine. Li Xian paused for a moment, as if he had understood something. Could it be that your maid heard what I said and didn't record it for me immediately? According to the process of a runway talent show, once a sword bearer loudly announced that he wanted someone, the maid had to immediately register the sword bearer at the control center. The maid would then belong to the sword bearer. No one else would be able to get the maid after that. No, our maid was prepared to register you immediately, but she realized that before that, another sword bearer had already chosen maid Wen Meiyun. Sujin was still full of smiles, but her words were full of mockery. You're saying that someone beat me to it? Li Xian's eyes widened as he asked irritably. Who was it? Who was it? Who was it? If the system isn't wrong, that person should be me. Gohan, who was standing at the side, had finally watched enough of the show. It was time for him to perform on stage. Gohan walked to Li Xian's side and patted his furious body. Senior Li Xian, I'm sorry. I beat you to it. It's you. Li Xian turned around abruptly and asked in disbelief. You didn't say a word just now. How did you beat me to it? Senior, you need to surf the internet more often. Gohan tapped on his personal terminal, and a web page appeared in the air. He took a closer look and realized that it was the official website of the Maid Service Center. Gohan held up the maid's information in his hand and explained seriously, Senior, look, there's a QR code on this information. As long as you scan this QR code, you'll be able to enter the automatic order page. There's no need to go through so much trouble to call the maid. With just a thought in my mind, the registration was successful. After listening to Gohan's explanation, Li Xian instantly felt terrible. While he had been stupidly shouting, this brat had already sneakily entered the website and registered Wen Meiyun in front of him. Actually, we shouldn't be too lazy. We shouldn't think about what others do for us. It's best to do it ourselves. Look, it's fast and convenient. How great is that? After Gohan finished explaining, he stabbed Li Xian in the heart again. Puffed. Li Xian was so infuriated by Gohan that he almost spat out a mouthful of blood. His eyes were burning with anger as he pressed both hands on Guhan's shoulders. He wanted to say something angrily, but he forcefully suppressed his anger and forced a smile. Junior, you're still young. You don't know the benefits of being a young girl. Those young maidservants are more suitable for you. This woman is old and secondhand. She's empty inside. Why don't you give her to me, Senior? Senior, please take your hand back. Guhan glanced at the hands that were pressing on his shoulders. I don't have the kind of sexual interest you're talking about. I just heard that this maid's culinary skills are pretty good. It just so happens that my sword lady is a foodie, so I'm definitely going to have this maid. Interesting. Li Xian no longer hid himself. He cannot be bothered to talk nonsense with this kid, so he used his last resort. Junior, do you dare to fight me? Chapter 99. On the third morning after Guhan was banned from logging into the game, there were still 8 hours before the ban was lifted and he was allowed to log into the game. The lighting in Guhan's new home was very good. When Guhan opened his eyes, the warm sunlight was already shining on his face. With the help of the sunlight, Guhan could clearly see every detail on Qingping's little face. What a perfect little loli. Not a single wrinkle could be seen on her skin. Guhan couldn't help but rub his face against Qingping's face. Then, he quietly got up and pushed open the door. In the living room, he saw a sumptuous breakfast on the table. Last night, in order to train Qingping's combat ability, Guhan guided Qingping to practice swordsmanship for half the night. The cute little guy was exhausted. Qingping, who usually got up early to watch TV, was still sleeping soundly. Good morning, Master. This servant will help Master wash up. Dressed in a black lace-made costume, the new maid, Wen Meiyun, appeared behind Guhan without him noticing. She held a tray in her hand, on which were 3 bowls of warm water, a toothbrush, and a tube of toothpaste. Although Wen Meiyun was already 35 years old, her figure was still as beautiful as when she was 25 years old. Maid costumes weren't clothes that could perfectly show off a woman's figure. But for some reason, when Wen Meiyun was wearing this maid outfit, Guhan could feel an astonishing amount of heat from within her clothes. A certain part of his body actually felt like it was about to move. This was also related to this morning. Everyone should know what was going on, so I won't say anything more. This servant will help Master rinse his mouth. When Meiyun handed a cup of warm water and a toothbrush to Guhan. Then she personally squeezed the toothpaste. When she squeezed the toothpaste, Wen Meiyun was very close to Guhan. Her hair floated into Guhan's nose. It was a mature and sweet smell of a woman. Don't, I'll do it myself. Guhan grabbed the cup and toothbrush and was about to go to the bathroom to brush his teeth when Wen Meiyun took out a spittoon from somewhere. She knelt on the ground and put the spittoon on top of her head. Master, please rinse your mouth. Guhan, who was served like this, suddenly felt pain all over his body. He rushed into the bathroom with a toothbrush and a glass of water. He said, "Go wake Qingping up," and hid in the bathroom. Last night, although the sword-bearer called Li Xian had used all sorts of words to threaten Guhan to give up on Wen Meiyun, Guhan did not take the wretched fellow seriously at all. According to the rules of the Sword Council, once the registration was successful, the female servant would be the exclusive female servant of the sword-bearer. No one, including Emperor Sword-level sword-bearers, was allowed to snatch the female servant. Otherwise, the Sword Council's law enforcement department would deal with such behavior severely. For example, they would cut off the sword mark, disqualify the sword-bearer, and so on. Of course, the law stated that Emperor Sword-level sword-bearers were no exception. However, in reality, forget about Emperor Sword-level sword-bearers. Even spiritual sword-level sword-bearers could snatch the female servant away. The Sword Council's law enforcement department could not do anything to these sword-bearers. After all, the strongest combat power in the law enforcement department was only spiritual sword level. Sword-bearers above spiritual sword level could ignore this law, but Li Xian definitely did not have the guts. The sword-bearers were everywhere in the sword-bearer service center. Even if Li Xian had 100 guts, he would not dare to forcefully snatch the female servant away. Although he had requested for a duel to decide who Maiden would belong to, Gahan could not be bothered with him. Gahan was an ancient sword-level sword-bearer. Moreover, he was a new ancient sword-level sword-bearer who had not even been here for a week. According to the law, within a year of becoming a sword-bearer, Gahan had the right to reject all duel invitations from other sword-bearers. Similarly, if he was faced with a duel invitation from a sword-bearer who was one level higher than him, Gahan also had the right to reject it. Although Gahan was confident that with his swordsmanship, he would be able to defeat this stupid treasure sword-level sword-bearer. However, why would Gahan waste his time and effort to duel with him? If he had the time, he would spend it reading books, playing games, clearing dungeons, and completing quests. Therefore, in the face of Li Xian's challenge to a duel, Gahan simply rolled his eyes and left with the meek and joyful Wen Meiyan, leaving Li Xian fuming on the spot and vomiting blood. Ever since he had brought Wen Meiyan home, Gahan had not asked Wen Meiyan anything about herself. For example, why did she want to be a maid? Will it be awkward for you to be my maid or something like that? He had only briefed her on everything that he needed her to do and arrange a room for her. After that, it was a quiet night. Wen Meiyan was grateful for this. She knew that Gahan did not ask her these questions because he did not want to hurt her self-esteem. She really did not want to answer these questions. It was breakfast time. After washing up, Gahan ate the bread in his mouth and drank a few mouthfuls of artificial milk. Qingpin's two little feet were on Gahan's thighs. His hands were resting on the dining table as he watched Shuk and Beta intently on the television. His little mouth opened and closed rhythmically because Wen Meiyan was stuffing rice into Qingpin's mouth. If one did not consider the maid costume that Wen Meiyan was wearing, there was no doubt that this was a sweet and heartwarming scene of a warm family of 3 having breakfast. Thank you for your hard work. It must be hard to feed a child. Seeing the sweat on Wen Meiyan's forehead and Qingpin's stuffed mouth, Gahan thanked her sincerely. It's not hard at all. Lady Qingpin is much better than Xiaoya when she was a child. She can swallow a mouthful of rice easily. A smile appeared on Wen Meiyan's face. Xiaoya didn't have such a good appetite as Lady Qingpin when she was a child. When I fed her a mouthful of rice, she could spit it out 2 mouthfuls. At that time, feeding Xiaoya every day was as tiring as if I had taken a bath. Your daughter... Gahan had wanted to ask what would happen to her daughter if she was a maid here. But after thinking about it, he decided not to ask this question. Since Wen Meiyan had made up her mind to be a maid, then she must have made arrangements for her daughter. There was no need for him to worry about it. So, Gahan changed his tone and asked, Are you used to living here? Are there any problems? Thank you for Master's concern. This place is even better than where this servant used to live. This servant is very used to living here. There are no other problems, but there is one question that I would like to ask Master. Wen Meiyan put down an empty bowl and chopsticks. This was the 5th bowl of rice that Qingpin had eaten. What question? Gahan asked blankly. Master, look, this month's living expenses. Wen Meiyan said hesitantly. This servant even paid for this breakfast. I originally planned to eat a day's worth of food, but Lady Qingpin ate it all in one morning. It was a total of 87 renminbi. Because Lady Qingpin likes to eat meat, this servant also cut half a caddy of artificial pork and put it into the rice. Do you want to give this servant this month's living expenses first? Pa! Gahan's chopsticks fell on the table, and her face was red. She actually forgot to give Wen Meiyan her living expenses. However, this wasn't the reason why Gahan blushed. The reason why Gahan blushed was that there was less than 50 renminbi left in her personal terminal. It wasn't even enough to pay back the money that Wen Meiyan had paid for it. I'll give you the living expenses tonight. Qingpin and I have to go out for a day. You can take care of your own lunch today. Don't worry about us. With that, Gahan carried Qingpin into her favorite pouch and hurried out of the house. Today was the day that Gahan and Song Hama would report to Yuzhong University. According to the rules of the Sword Council, all sword bearers had to enter Yuzhong University after coordinating with the Sword Lady. There, they would learn more about sword bearers' combat knowledge and accept all kinds of newbie tasks and tests from school. This was a hard and fast rule that no one could refuse. Guhan and Song Hama met at the entrance of Yuzhong University. The two of them standing together were very eye-catching. One of them had a little lowly hanging on his chest, while the other was the other way around. He was being carried by his sword lady princess. In short, they were automatically classified as perverts by the onlookers. "Hello, Lady Qingpin." When Song Hama saw Qingpin in Guhan's pouch, she was attracted by her cute appearance. She leaned over with a lecherous face, trying to please Qingpin. In the end, Qingpin was so scared that she retracted her head back into the pouch. She kept muttering, "So scary, so scary." Song Hama was so embarrassed that she didn't know where to put her hands. After Guhan and Song Hama met up, they entered Yuzhong University together to complete the admission procedures. Fortunately, Yuzhong University didn't charge any fees. Otherwise, with less than 50 RBM left in Guhan's wallet, he wouldn't be able to do anything. The class composition of Yuzhong University was based on the order of registration. Simply put, it was a class of 30 sword bearers who registered at the same time. Fortunately, Guhan discovered that his and Song Hama's student numbers were 30 and 29 respectively. This meant that Guhan and Song Hama were the 30th and 29th new sword bearers. If they were any later, Guhan and Song Hama might have been separated into different classes. After passing through a secluded path, they arrived at Guhan's class 22694. This meant that this class was the 22694 new sword bearers class opened in Yuzhong City. Batch after batch of sword bearers would graduate from this class and enter the cruel outside world. Guhan sighed a little and walked into class 22694 with Song Hama, which he would be staying in for a year in the future. In this class, there were countless famous swordsman groups that had created impressive battle achievements in the past 1,000 years. Most of the members of this class had gathered in this very first class, interacted with each other, fought, and lived and died together. When Guhan entered the class, the other 28 students were already sitting in the classroom, waiting for the last two students, Guhan and Song Hama. Will there be future comrades here? Guhan glanced at everyone. There were both male and female students. There were youths who were 18 like him, and there were also middle-aged men who looked to be in their 30s. "Guhan, sit here." Suddenly, a voice called Guhan's name. "Wait, why does someone know my name here?" Guhan looked to the back of the class. There was a person he didn't want to see sitting there. Chapter 100. It was said that the last few rows in every class were reserved for the bad students in the eyes of the teachers. Unfortunately for Guhan, he was late. Only his and Song Hama's seats were left in the last row. The desks in the classroom were all for two people, but there was no such thing as sharing a desk. The other seat was reserved for the sword maidens of the sword bearers. Beside every sword bearer sat their sword maidens. When Song Hama sat down, he ran into some trouble. His sword mistress was too big. The desk was too small for the sword mistress. Song Hama couldn't even fit his legs in it. Helpless, Song Hama could only go to the academic affairs office and seek help from the management to get a bigger desk. Like this, Guhan was the only one left in the last row. Guhan did not have much of an opinion about that. What he did have an opinion about was the classmate sitting in front of him, the future leader of the Liunian family, Miss Liunian Lin, whose background was so noble that it scared everyone to death. "Hello, Miss Liunian Ling." Liunian Ling covered Guhan's mouth before he could finish his sentence. "My name is A.O. Lin now. You are not allowed to say my real name out loud," Liunian Ling said. It seemed like this young miss had already arranged a new identity for herself. The surname Liunian was too famous and rare in this world. Anyone who heard of it would habitually associate it with a family that stood at the peak of the human world. This was naturally not something that Liunian Ling wanted to see. Conceal one's real identity and forge a new one. This was an impossible task for ordinary sword bearers. No one could change their identity under the surveillance of the bat. However, it was not an impossible task for the Liunian family. It was just a little troublesome. "Hello, Miss A.O. Lin." Guhan changed his greeting and ignored Liunian Ling. Guhan instinctively felt that Liunian Ling was probably here for him. "Hey, My good disciple, aren't you curious why I'm here? Liu Ling leaned back and asked quietly. I'm not interested, Gahan said dryly. He then placed Qing Pin, who was sleeping soundly in the pouch, on the chair beside him. Gahan was very impressed with Qing Pin. He could actually sleep so carefreely on his chest. After settling Qing Pin down, Gahan suddenly wondered what was going on with Liu Ling and her sword maiden, Yixian. He looked at the seat beside Liu Ling and saw a graceful young girl sitting beside Liu Ling. She was dressed in a light, classic muslin dress and looked like someone from the Middle Ages. This sword maiden is definitely not Yixian. Although Gahan did not see the front, he could accurately make such a judgment just by looking at the back. But I personally experienced the entire process of Liu Ling and Yixian synchronization. How could her sword maiden not be Yixian? Could it be that this sword maiden is not Liu Ling's sword maiden? Or did Liu Ling swap herself with an ancient sword maiden? No, that's impossible. Even if Fleeting Time's family is rich, there's no way they'd use their precious green hair on a mere ancient sword-tier swordsman. Gahan immediately denied this speculation. What he did not know was that at this very moment, there was a sword maiden from Liu Ling's family traveling from Yinjing City with the precious green silk. He was preparing to use it on a mere ancient sword maiden. Students, I am the homeroom teacher of class 22,694. My name is Luo Fan, Luo as in Luo Gua, Fan as in sailing boat. From today onwards, I will lead class 22694 for an entire year. During this year, all of you will be a team. You will attend classes together, learn together, fight together, and face death together. Our Yuzhong University has never had a timetable, nor do we have any fixed teachers. We don't even have a fixed class schedule. If there's anything that's fixed, it's the classroom, the students, and even me, the homeroom teacher. You're all adults. You've learned enough about culture and knowledge in school. That's why Yuzhong University has never taught you these things. So, what does Yuzhong University teach you? Luo Fan paused for a moment and then wrote the word experience on the blackboard. We'll only teach you experience. Experience with the sword maiden, experience in improving your sword essence, and most importantly, experience in battle. All the experience I'll teach you will become the guarantee of your survival in the future. The homeroom teacher, Luo Fan, was giving his passionate speech on the podium, waking up Qing Pin, who was sleeping soundly in the last row. She opened her eyes in dissatisfaction, looking for the culprit who disturbed her sweet dreams. However, when she saw Luo Fan's face clearly, she jumped onto the table and shouted excitedly, Gahan, look! It's the pervert who wants to kidnap Qing Pin. Yes, Luo Fan's homeroom teacher was none other than the brute who ate more than 80,000 yuan for Gahan and Qing Pin in Chanel 2 days ago. She did not expect him to be a sword wielder as well. Moreover, he was a teacher at Yuzhong University, Gahan's homeroom teacher. Qing Pin's shouting immediately attracted the attention of the whole class. And of course, Luo Fan was no exception. Originally, being called a pervert was something that made him very angry. However, when he saw Gahan and Qing Pin's faces clearly, he immediately smiled. The time for his revenge had finally arrived. Student, please keep quiet with your sword maiden, or I'll have to ask you to get out of the classroom. Luo Fan threw out one of the homeroom teacher's classic sayings and continued with his opening speech, as if he did not remember that Gahan had cheated him of 80,000 yuan. Luo Fan's speech lasted for about 30 minutes. Just when everyone felt that their heads were getting bigger and bigger, the homeroom teacher finally ended his long speech and moved on to the next procedure. From today onwards, for a year, our class 22694 will be a fighting group, a group that trusts each other, a group that will sacrifice everything for its comrades. Therefore, it is very important for us to get familiar with each other as a group. Starting from me, everyone will have 3 minutes to properly introduce themselves and their sword maidens from start to finish. It seemed that no matter what kind of school or what kind of class, a self-introduction was inevitable. My name is Luo Fan, Luo as in Luo Gua, sail as in sailboat. I am your homeroom teacher, 33 years old this year, a sword wielder of the treasure sword grade. I have two sword maidens. One is the ancient sword grade man-made aqua blue sword, and the other is the treasure sword grade man-made blazing brilliant sword. However, they're not here right now. Otherwise, I would be able to let you meet them. Originally, I had already stopped leading classes. This year, I was planning to form a team with my friends to go and deal with Yuan Ko. The one who arranged to lead you guys was another teacher, but he was unlucky. 2 days ago, when he was escorting goods, his neck was slit by Yuan Ko. Therefore, I had no choice but to lead you guys for another year. I have a very forthright personality, and I like to drink. If any of you want to bribe me, then bring me wine. Ha ha ha. Luo Fan's words were said in a very relaxed manner, but the contents of his words caused everyone to be shocked, and then became somewhat sorrowful. It turned out that the teacher that was originally arranged for their class had actually died at the hands of Yuan Ko 3 days ago. Then in the future, would there also be a day where they would be like that teacher, looking forward to a peaceful life a second ago, but in the next second, they would be separated forever? All right, since you have chosen to become a sword wielder and enjoy a superior life, then you must bear the responsibility of being superior. What is there to be afraid of about death? At least it is much better than being locked up in the headquarters city for the rest of your life. Student number 1, come over here and let me introduce you. Yes, Teacher Luo. A bespectacled young man in his 20s walked up to the podium with his sword maiden. It seemed that he was student number 1 of class 22694. Hello everyone, my name is Chun Yongsheng. Chun as in Chinshuang Jindi, Yongquan as in Jindi, Sheng as in Xia Jindi. Ever since I was young, I have aspired to become a sword wielder that fights for humanity. After experiencing many setbacks and failures, I finally managed to synchronize with my sword maiden 4 days ago and became a true sword wielder. Beside me is my sword maiden, an ancient grade white iron sword. Although she is somewhat taciturn, she is my most trusted companion. I hope that the two of us can be together forever. Apart from wanting to become a sword wielder, I also want to be a poet. I have written many poems, and a few of them have even been published by Yuzhong Daily. Now, I will read to everyone the poem that I am most satisfied with. The stars in the sky are mixed with the Big Dipper, you go, I go, all go. When I see injustice on the road, I roar, and Yuan Ko hangs himself on the southeast branch. Student number 1, Chun Yongsheng, actually used more than half of the 3-minute self-introduction time to recite his own poem. Gahan was very skeptical about whether this old boy who was suitable to be a poet running over to become a sword wielder was a reliable thing to do. However, Chun Yongsheng's poem very well livened up the atmosphere in the classroom. The rest of the students went up to the podium in a joyous atmosphere and began to introduce themselves. Gohan silently recorded these students' words in his mind and calculated them. Apart from himself, Song Hama, and Liu Ling, there were 27 other students. Only one was a natural sword maiden, while the rest were man-made. Among these man-made sword maidens, there were 3 original sword maidens: the Azure Edge sword, the White Iron sword, and the 100 Forged sword. This was a good indication of why the game chose these 3 swords as the original sword maidens. It was because 2/3 of the ancient grade sword wielder in the world used these 3 original sword maidens. However, this did not mean that the original sword maidens were weak. Purely based on the statistics, the 3 original sword maidens were above average among all the ancient grade sword maidens. Although Guhan remembered the appearances and names of the 26 students who had created the sword ladies, he wasn't very interested in them. In his heart, unless a miracle happened, the future and development of the sword lady's sword wielder weren't worth mentioning. Only those sword wielder with natural sword maidens were companions that Guhan paid attention to and wanted to befriend. Don't think that Guhan was mean. All the sword wielder in the world were like this. Chapter 101. Liu Ling's student number was 28, so she introduced herself in front of Gahan and Song Hama. My name is Ao Lin, the Dragon King of the East Sea, Ao Guang, and the Ling from Rin Enbin. The Dragon King of the East Sea, Ao Guang, was the universe-level Yuan Ko who was entrenched in the East Sea, while Rin Inbin was the meteor-level magician Yuan Ko who had destroyed the entire Toki city. When other people introduced themselves, they would use everyday words like Min Xuan, Deus Han, and so on. Only Liuyan Ling used the name of the famous Yuan Ko to introduce herself. My goal is very simple. I want to become the strongest swordsman in the world. For this, I will not hesitate to kill any Yuan Ko who stands in my way. Anyone who can help me, I will do my best to win them over to my side. I hope that there are talented people among you who are worthy of my help. Liuyan Ling stared at Gahan as she said this. It was obvious that she was talking to Gahan. However, Gahan had no feelings for her. He was focused on pinching the soft ears on Qingpin's crocodile hat. My Qingpin is much better looking than Liuyan Ling. Seeing Guhan's expression, Liuyan Ling couldn't help but feel a little anxious. At the same time, Liuyan Ling's domineering declaration made the students below the stage explode. Who is this woman? She wants to recruit us as her subordinates, just because she's so arrogant. What a lunatic. It seemed like from the beginning, Liuyan Ling's relationship with the whole class was very tense. This is my sword lady, Tianwen. Faced with all kinds of comments and mockery, Liuyan Ling didn't say much. She just introduced the sword lady standing beside her. However, the moment Tianwen's name was mentioned, the form teacher, Luo Fan, who was standing behind Liuyan Ling as if he was watching a joke, lost his balance and almost fell off the podium. The rest of the students were in an uproar. They looked at Liuyan Ling as if they were looking at a monster. If it wasn't for the fact that a sword wielder wouldn't joke about their own sword mistress, they wouldn't have believed that this aggressive woman was already a sword wielder at the level of a treasure sword. Yes, that's right. Liuyan Ling was already a treasured sword wielder, because Tianwen's sword was a sword maiden of the treasured sword rank. Furthermore, it was a powerful sword maiden ranked 3rd in the treasure sword record. In just 4 short days, Liuyan Ling had risen from an ancient sword maiden to a terrifying famed sword. No wonder Luo Fan and the rest were shocked. However, Gahan wasn't surprised. He continued to stroke the head of the Qingpin sword calmly. As the descendant of the Kanzu family, he had access to the vast resources of the Liuyan family. Even if she, Liuyan Ling, was a piece of trash, it would be easy for her to become a treasured sword in the 3 days. Gahan wouldn't be surprised even if she became a famed sword wielder in 3 days. Moreover, Liuyan Ling was a talented woman. None of the descendants of the Liuyan family were weak. Let's go, Tianwen. After the self-introduction, Liuyan Ling led the silent Tianwen back to their seats. During this process, everyone's attention was focused on Liuyan Ling. She was actually a treasured sword wielder. No wonder she dared to say such arrogant words. Next, student Gahan, please come on stage and introduce yourself. The homeroom teacher, Luo Fan, who had regained his composure, continued his self-introduction. Hey, my good disciple, it's your turn. Liuyan Ling knocked on Gahan's table with a smile. If you call me disciple again, I'll call you by your real name. Gahan threatened Liuyan Ling without any hesitation. However, his mouth didn't move. This was all thanks to the secret voice transmission technique that Liuyan Ling had taught him. Batty, Liuyan Ling pinched Gahan's, but as he walked past her to introduce himself. Not bad. There's definitely something going on between the two of them. Seeing this scene, the students all said with certainty, Gahan's introduction wasn't outstanding. When Gahan introduced Qingpin, it didn't cause a huge commotion like Liuyan Ling. They all thought that poverty was just an inconspicuous name hidden among the thousands of ancient sword-grade sword ladies in the ancient sword record that they had forgotten. They didn't know that Qingpin's name wasn't recorded in the entire ancient sword records at all. When Song Hama and Zhu Yuntai moved the large desk from the administration office, the homeroom teacher, Luo Fan, was nowhere to be seen. Half of the students in the classroom had left. However, everyone would meet again soon. This was because after lunch, the first practical class of class 2269-4 was about to begin. When Song Hama entered the classroom, she happened to hear Gahan complaining to Liunyun Ling. "Miss Liunyun Ling, can you not look at me like that?" After the self-introduction, Luo Fan announced that everyone was free to do whatever they wanted. After gathering on the first floor of the building of practical training in the afternoon, Gahan maintained his upright posture and waited for Song Hama to return. Liunyun Ling maintained her elegant expression as she looked at Guhan's handsome face like a love-struck fool, a faint smile on her face. Even with Gahan's thick skin, he couldn't help but feel his hair stand on end after being stared at by Liunyun Ling for a few minutes. "Don't tell me this woman has taken a fancy to me?" This thought popped up in Gahan's mind, but he quickly rejected it. This woman must have taken a fancy to his potential and wanted to forcefully pull him into the Liunyun aristocratic family to become her subordinate. Every master of the Liunyun aristocratic family would have a few loyal and powerful subordinates. Being a subordinate of the master of the Liunyun aristocratic family was a very profitable thing to do. At the very least, they would receive all sorts of top-notch cultivation resources. If Liunyun Ling were to advertise for subordinates on television, newspapers, and the internet, a large number of sword-bearers would be begging to become the loyal dogs of the Liunyun aristocratic family. Of course, the Liunyun aristocratic family would not do something so immoral. "Sour Popsicle? Your girlfriend?" Song Hama came up to Fleeting Time Ling. He did not hear Fleeting Time Ling's self-introduction. Naturally, he did not know that Fleeting Time Ling was a sword wielder. Song Hama blurted out when he saw Liunyun Ling's affectionate expression. "Sour Popsicle?" Liunyun Ling giggled when she heard the nickname. "Who gave it to you? Why did you give it such a nickname?" "Beauty, you might not know this, but Gahan may look like a cold popsicle, but he's actually a real man on the inside. He once came to my house for a free meal, and he—" "Song Hama, if you say another word, I'll get Minuet to teach you a lesson." "Ahem." Song Hama's expression changed. "Our Gahan is an aloof Prince Charming." "Absolutely." Liunyun Ling clung to Gahan from the moment Song Hama returned to the classroom until they gathered at the building of practical training in the afternoon. She even sat with Song Hama and Gahan during lunch, as if the three of them were childhood sweethearts. Well, forget it. Since it was Liunyun Ling's treat for lunch, Gahan decided to endure it. Qingpin alone ate the 300 renminbi campus meal. Gahan was having a headache, wondering which item in the game he should sell to feed this ancestor. When they gathered at the building of practical training, Liunyun Ling was still standing with Song Hama and Gahan, causing many students to lament the birth of another adulterous couple. They then cursed Gahan for not being strong enough to be kicked out by his genius girlfriend. "Are you students from class 22694? A hoarse male voice came from the door. "I'm your indoor practical training teacher, Li Xian. You can call me Teacher Li Xian, but I prefer you to call me Lord Li Xian. From today onwards, I'll be in charge of your indoor practical training. All of you follow me." Li Xian? What a familiar name. Gahan was stunned when he heard the name. He looked up and happened to meet the teacher's gaze. Sure enough, this Li Xian was the wretched swordsman Li Xian who had fought with him for Wen Meiyun in the maid service center. After becoming a swordsman, there were only two people who had a grudge with Gahan. One of them was Luo Fan, who had become Gahan's homeroom teacher, while the other was Li Xian, who had become Gahan's indoor practical training teacher. On the first day Gahan entered Yuzhong University, he had successfully formed a feud with two of his main teachers. This was the so-called exploding luck. Compared to Gahan's gloominess, Li Xian was calm because everything was under his control. A month ago, Li Xian had sent off a substitute teacher's class to graduate. After that, he had entered a 6-month period of free time. During this period, Li Xian could rest, fight, and do whatever he wanted. His salary was even paid to him, not less than 1 yuan. He would be on paid leave until 6 months later when he would be assigned to his new class. In the end, after forming a grudge with Gahan last night, Li Xian quickly determined based on his experience that Gahan must be a newcomer who had just become a swordsman. He would definitely report to Yuzhong University in the next few days and enter the class of the new students. Li Xian rushed to the academic affairs office early that morning and checked the information of the new class. As expected, he found Gahan's name among the large pile of names. Therefore, Li Xian immediately expressed to the academic affairs office that he was willing to give up his leave to teach and educate people. He wanted to lead more swordsmen and took the initiative to lead Guhan's class for indoor practical training. Someone in the academic affairs office took the initiative to work overtime and approved Li Xian's recommendation. Li Xian then naturally became the indoor practical training teacher of class 22694. He had prepared a good gift for Gahan as a greeting gift. Chapter 102. Could it be that this Li Xian is a good person who can distinguish between public and private interests? The lesson had already lasted for half an hour, but Li Xian did not show any signs of targeting Gahan. In fact, when he was checking on Gahan's basic physical skills, he even loudly praised Gahan for having a solid foundation and superb physical skills. He was a role model that all students should learn from. In short, Li Xian did not seem to be targeting Gahan at all. This left Gahan scratching his head in confusion. He began to wonder if he was gauging the heart of a gentleman with his own mean measure. However, Gahan soon realized that Li Xian was a despicable person through and through. Students, no matter how good your grades are, no matter how much knowledge you have in your head, what really matters is your combat ability. Therefore, it is my job as an indoor practical training instructor to nurture your basic combat experience. Li Xian brought all the students of class 22694 to the largest room on the second floor of the building of practical training. The room was about 700 to 800 square meters. In the center of the room, there was a circular sandy area of about 500 square meters surrounded by 24 crystal pillars carved with all sorts of strange runes. Outside the crystal pillars was a circle of floorboards. Students, what you're looking at now is the first beginner practical training arena on the second floor of Yuzhong University's building of practical training. This will be the combat arena where you will undergo beginner indoor practical training for the next few months. At this point, Li Xian paused. His ugly face looked like a mosquito coil. Students, may I ask if any of you have actual combat experience with Yuan Ko? Of course, I'm talking about real-life experience, not in-game experience. Everyone looked at each other, but no one raised their hand. Before officially becoming a sword wielder, who would have the guts to fight a real-life Yuan Ko? Only Liu Ling raised her hand high. Teacher, I've already killed hundreds of Yuan Ko. Liu Ling was speaking the truth. Even before she had become a sword bearer, she had been protected by the Lun Yin clan. She had used her unawakened sword mistress and her own body to fight against the various Yuan Ko. This was an experience that every sword master had to go through. However, it was obvious that Li Xian did not believe what Liu Ling had said. This female student must be joking. He, Li Xian, was a treasure sword level sword wielder, yet he had killed less than 30 Yuan Ko. You, a female student who had just become a sword wielder, would be bragging if you killed one, let alone over 100. Student, bragging will not improve your strength. Please listen to me quietly. Li Xian mocked Liu Ling and continued to ask, it seems like everyone has no actual combat experience. In that case, let me ask everyone again. Do you know how to increase the sword element value in your body? I know, Teacher Li Xian. A student rushed to answer excitedly. Consuming the sword element pill in the game can increase our sword element value in real life. This student is right. This is indeed a way to increase the sword element value in your body. However, students, Sword Lady Online is a game that has been running for 200 years. In that case, how did our predecessors increase their sword element value in the 800 years before that? They did not have the sword element pill and sword element pill in the game to consume. Li Xian's words made some students who did not have a solid foundation speechless. They really did not know how their predecessors had increased the sword element value in their bodies before the game had even existed. However, Gahan, Liu Ling, and a few others smiled without saying a word. This question was only meant for those who were ignorant and incompetent. Anyone who had studied would know the answer to this question. Students, I will now demonstrate to you how to increase your sword element value without consuming the sword element pill in the game. With that, Li Xian leaped handsomely and flew into the beginner combat arena in the middle of the room. He had practiced this entrance move more than 100 times. It was indeed very handsome. When a flower blooms, it must be plucked. Don't wait until the flower is gone and the branch is empty. Come out, my most beloved flower, the flower shadow sword. Li Xian performed a very obvious choreographed routine. He drew his sword handsomely with practiced movements. Then, with his immature lines, the flower shadow sword that he carried on his back appeared. Flowery shadow sword, an ancient sword ranked sword maiden. Judging from her dull expression, it should be a man-made sword maiden. Guhan glanced at Li Xian's sword maiden and determined that it was a man-made one. This was because the sword lady's flower shadow sword had a very dull expression. Her eyeballs rarely moved. Although her movements were very smooth, it was obvious that she lacked spirituality. This was the biggest difference between natural sword ladies and man-made sword ladies. Although they could move, talk, and fight, man-made sword ladies always gave people the feeling that they had no soul. After all, these sword ladies were man-made. Although it was said that there were already forbidden research organizations studying the nature of souls and attempting to create souls artificially, souls were still a forbidden zone for gods. But until now, the soul was still a forbidden zone for the gods. Humans could forge artificial sword maidens that were similar to sword maidens in all aspects, but they could never forge the souls of these sword maidens. System, release a human warrior for me. Li Xian, who had gotten into position and released a sword lady, ordered the central system of the building of practical training. Understood. A human warrior will be released in 30 seconds. Please prepare for battle. The mechanical system replied. The mechanical voice of the system replied. On the ground of the beginner combat arena, a steel cage slowly rose. In the cage, a human warrior wearing simple leather armor and with bloodshot eyes was crazily slashing at the cage with the sword in his hand. On the surface, this was a living human. He was no different from the other sword bearers present. Oh my God, this is a human. A few female sword bearers covered their mouths in surprise. No, this isn't a human. This is Yuan Ko. Li Xian had the expression of a cold teacher. He is the mortal enemy of humans. The Yuan Ko who should be hacked into pieces. Hey, Sour Popsicle, you're so cultured. Is the one locked in this cage really not a human? Song Hama asked Gahan softly. In his opinion, there was indeed a human inside. How should I put it? You can call them human beings, but you can also call them Yanwei. But in the end, they are Yanwei. Gohan rubbed the head of the sleeping Qingpin sword under his chin and explained coldly. In the 2D world, they should be genuine human soldiers. However, after being sucked into our world through the dimensional rift, they became genuine Yuan Ko. But they are intelligent humans. They are not demonic beasts with no intelligence. Why can't we reason with them and make them give up on being enemies with us and even join us? To them, their identity as humans should make them feel closer. Song Hama was puzzled. Do they look intelligent to you? Song Hama stared blankly. Indeed, looking at the expression and movements of this human warrior in the cage, he indeed looked more like a beast without intelligence. I don't know why, but the human Yuan Ko who enters our world from the 2D world will have a portion of their humanity whittled away. The lower their strength, the more of it will be whittled away. This human warrior, for example, is probably only at the standard of a mouse. After going through the dimensional teleportation, out of 100 points of wisdom, only 5 points is left. Right now, he is no different from a bloodthirsty beast. Halfway through Gahan's explanation, the metal cage was opened by the system. The beast-like human warrior locked inside was like a ferocious tiger that had escaped its cage. He grabbed his large saber and ran out. A pair of bloodshot eyes scanned the surroundings. He did not attack Li Xian and Flowery Sword who were close at hand. Instead, he charged at the new sword bearers who were watching from the sidelines. A few timid female sword-bearers cried out in fear when they saw the human warrior suddenly charging at them. Although they had killed many Yuan Ko in the game, in reality, when faced with a real battle scene, they still instinctively screamed in fear from the bottom of their hearts. Not good. Cast Cloud Steel. Go and stop that Yuan Ko. Seeing that the human warrior was about to rush through the isolation crystal pillar and attack the shivering sword-bearers, Song Hama subconsciously ordered Cast Cloud Steel to go and save them. There's no need. Gahan pressed down on Song Hama's shoulder. Watch carefully. This Yuan Ko can't hurt anyone. Sure enough, just as Gohan said, when the human warrior came into contact with the isolation barrier formed by the crystal pillar, which was originally no different from an ordinary pillar, suddenly shot out a glass-like barrier. It blocked the human warrior who wanted to rush through the isolation barrier like a hard wall. What is this thing? Song Hama was stunned. These crystal pillars are made of dimensional crystals. Lin Yinling, who had been silent all this while, explained, these dimensional crystals can be processed with special runes to form a barrier that can isolate Yuan Ko's power. However, this is the lowest quality dimensional crystal, and it can only isolate the power of a mouse and a tiger. Dimensional crystal? The dimensional crystal used to make the base city's city wall. Song Hama revealed a look of sudden realization. Yes, it's the dimensional crystal used to make the city wall. However, the city wall uses a higher quality crystal, and after going through special craftsmanship, it can even defend against attacks from Yuan Ko below the universe level, unlike the trash here. Li Xian's heart was filled with a perverted sense of accomplishment when he saw how the female swordsmen were frightened by the human warrior. However, to his regret, the fellow named Gahan didn't seem to be frightened. All right, it's enough to scare these newbies a little. It's time to let them see the power of the powerful sword wielder, Master Li Xian. Go, Flowery Shadow, finish this quickly. Li Xian ordered the Flowery Shadow sword in a voice that everyone in the room could hear. The Flowery Shadow, who was originally standing in a daze, seemed to have changed into a different person. It quickly rushed towards the human warrior who was still trying to break through the isolation barrier. Just as the Flowery Shadow was about to attack the human warrior, Yuan Ko finally sensed danger. He gave up on breaking through the isolation barrier and swung the large sword in his hand at the Flowery Shadow sword. Clang! The human warrior's large sword was directly cut into two. The human warrior let out a beast-like howl as he tried to attack the Flowery Shadow with his bare hands. The Flowery Shadow leapt off the ground and leapt into the air. The Flowery Shadow, sword in her hand, danced in the air like falling petals. In an instant, the human warrior's limbs were cut off. His bloodshot eyes lost their luster, and his entire body fell heavily to the ground. Yuan Ko was dead. At the same time, a dimensional vortex began to slowly form beside the human warrior. The human warrior's corpse had already been completely absorbed by the dimensional vortex, and the rice bowl-sized dimensional vortex slowly disappeared. The Flowery Shadow sword, who had not had enough, put down her hand and silently returned to Li Xian's side. Just like what all of you have seen, dimensional rifts are filled with all sorts of high elemental elements and all sorts of strange things. As long as we humans come into contact with the dimensional rifts, we will either lose our limbs or instantly explode. Therefore, we must not use our bodies to touch the dimensional vortex. Furthermore, even if we humans come into contact with the dimensional vortex and do not suffer any harm, we will not be able to absorb any of the sword elements in the vortex. Only our sword lady can ignore the various harmful substances in the dimensional vortex and successfully absorb the sword elements into her body. The part of the sword lady's body that touches the dimensional vortex is also very particular. Just like Hua Ying, she used her palm to touch the secondary vortex, instead of using her head, feet, shoulders, or other parts of her body to touch it. This is because the sword lady can only absorb the sword elements at the hilt of her sword. The hilt of flowery shadows, sword is on her palm. Sword lady's absorbing the sword elements in the dimensional vortex is only the first step. Next, I will teach you the second step, which is how to transfer the sword elements absorbed by the sword lady into your own body. Li Xian, the wretched man, unconsciously let out a lascivious laugh, although this laugh was very well hidden. Li Xian wrapped his arms around Hua Ying's waist. Just like a beautiful scene in a movie, he slowly bent down and kissed Hua Ying's lips heavily. Then there was the sound of their mouths and tongues intertwining. Wow, pervert! When the group of new sword-bearers saw this inappropriate kissing scene, they shyly covered their eyes. After a few minutes, Li Xian stood up straight again. He wiped the saliva from the corner of his mouth and said with a smile, "I'm not a pervert. This is the most effective way for the sword lady to transfer the absorbed sword elements to the sword-bearer. The transfer rate is the highest." Nonsense. Gohan's face was full of disdain. Indeed, transferring sword elements through kissing was a method with a relatively high transfer rate. About 40% of the sword elements absorbed by the sword lady from the dimensional vortex could be transferred to the sword bearer's body through kissing. However, this was not the most effective method. The most effective method was for the sword lady to return to her sword and stick it to her chest in the form of a sword. Through the sword mark, about 50% of the sword elements could be transferred, which was 10% more than kissing. Most sword bearers used the sword mark transfer as the most effective transfer channel. Li Xian chose to kiss purely out of his perverted sexual interest. What was even more infuriating was that he did not teach his students the most effective method of sword mark transfer. He was completely misleading them. Gohan could not stand it anymore. He felt that he had to point this out to his face. He could not let this pervert destroy the future pillars of humanity. Just as Gohan was about to speak, Liu Ling asked the question that Gohan wanted to ask. "Teacher, may I know why you didn't teach us the sword mark transfer method?" As the future head of the Lunyan family, Liu Ling could not stand Li Xian's actions either. Li Xian's face froze when he heard a student below the stage ask this question. He did not expect that someone below the stage would dare to slap him in the face like this. In the past, when he taught students who knew the sword mark transfer method would not dare to point out Li Xian's mistake out of consideration for the teacher-student relationship. As a result, many sword bearers only found out about the sword mark transfer method after a long time. They lost 1/5 of their sword elements for no reason. Haha, female student, don't be anxious. I'm only demonstrating the kissing transfer method. I'll teach you the sword mark transfer method later. Li Xian casually made up a lie before explaining the usage of the sword mark transfer method in a dry manner. Then, he entered the highlight of the lesson, the first battle of the rookie sword bearers' indoor practical training. Next, we'll begin the indoor combat training. In a while, each of you will enter the arena alone. The system will randomly release a mouse-grade Yuan Ko. Your mission is to command your sword lady to fight this Yuan Ko and kill him, or perhaps the sword elements in the dimensional vortex. This is your first time in actual combat. Don't be afraid of injury, much less death. That's because Teacher will take care of you in the arena. Teacher will protect you. After saying that, Li Xian began to call out the students to enter the combat arena. Student number 1, Chun Yongsheng, enter the arena with your sword lady. Li Xian gave the order. Although Chun Yongsheng, who loved to write poems, was trembling all over, he still walked into the center of the arena with his white iron sword. Come on, teacher has high hopes for you. Li Xian patted Chun Yongsheng's shoulder and walked to the side of the arena, about 30 meters away from Chun Yongsheng. This distance was very particular. Not only could it ensure that it wouldn't interfere with Chun Yongsheng's battle, but it could also save Chun Yongsheng's life if the situation went awry. In the middle of the arena, another cage containing Yuan Jun slowly rose. This time, it was no longer a human warrior. Instead, it was a desert wolf that Guhan had encountered in the Wudong Pinnacle Instance Dungeon. He was not sure if the readers still remembered this kind of demon wolf that could shoot fireballs. by Tai Jian, kill that desert wolf. When Chen Yongsheng saw the desert wolf escape its cage, he subconsciously ordered Sword Lady Bai Tai to block it. Bai Tai received the order and immediately brandished her white iron sword. In an instant, she was engaged in a battle with the desert wolf. Bai Tai was a Confucian sword lady, and the Confucian sword lady was the weakest in close combat among all the swordsmen. They usually played the role of protecting the flanks and supporting the sword bearers. In addition, Bai Tai had just synchronized, so she didn't have complete control over her body. In addition, she didn't have a deep sword mark and was still a blank slate. Bai Tai, who should have been able to suppress the rat-class Yuan Ko Desert Wolf, was gradually at a disadvantage. However, this didn't matter. If the battle continued, Bai Tai would still win. This was because the Desert Wolf was a very fragile Yuan Ko. Compared to the Confucian sword lady's thick, close-fitting shield, even if it was a 2-1 exchange of damage, it would still be Bai Tai's victory. The Desert Wolf seemed to have realized this. It paid the price of Bai Tai's sword on its back to forcefully break free from the entanglement with Bai Tai. Then, it pounced on Chen Yongsheng, who was watching the battle from behind. Hey, this wild wolf is quite smart. It knows to capture the leader first. Gohan praised the Desert Wolf. However, Gohan's praise didn't bring about a good ending for the Desert Wolf. Chen Yongsheng was so frightened by the sudden appearance of the Desert Wolf that he was paralyzed on the ground. Even though the sword lady behind him was a few meters away from Bai Tai. Even though the wolf had bitten Chen Yongsheng's throat, Chen Yongsheng's energy shield still had 1/3 of its energy left. When Bai Tai rushed back to Chen Yongsheng's side, the Desert Wolf's death was near. Because it had exposed its back while attacking Chen Yongsheng, Bai Tai slashed angrily with its sword a few times, creating a huge wound on the Desert Wolf's body. The wild wolf died in the end. Student Chen Yongsheng, when the Desert Wolf left Bai Tai, why didn't you run away? Instead, you sat on the ground? Li Xian, who was watching from the side, sighed and commented, if you had taken the initiative to meet up with Bai Tai just now, you wouldn't have lost so many close-fitting shields. Although you still killed the Desert Wolf, you can't just face one Yuan Ko on a real battlefield. If there were 2 or 3 Yuan Ko attacking you at the same time, you wouldn't even be able to last 3 seconds. Do you understand? This time, I can only give you a C. Now, go down and think about your battle experience. Think about how you can do better next time, Wei Xiaobei said with a smile. Li Xian shook his head. Next, get your sword lady to absorb the sword elements in the dimensional vortex. Chapter 104. The hilt of Bai Tai's sword was the same as the flowery shadow sword. They were both in his hands. Therefore, Chen Yongsheng's absorption process was similar to Li Xian's. There was no need to elaborate further. The only difference from Li Xian was that Chen Yongsheng did not have the guts to kiss Bai Tai in public. He returned Bai Tai's sword to its sword form and placed it close to his body. He silently returned to the side, communicated with his sword mark, and began transferring the sword essence that Bai Tai had absorbed. Sour Popsicle, there are some things I don't understand. Song Hama scratched his head in confusion as he watched Chen Yongsheng silently transferring the sword essence by the side. Why does the sword essence in the game grow by consuming the sword essence pill? Why doesn't it imitate reality and rely on killing Yuan Ko to absorb the sword essence in the dimensional vortex to increase the sword essence? It's rare that you've thought of this question. I thought you'd never think about such a question for the rest of your life. Gohan joked before his expression turned solemn. Many people have raised this question, but the officials have never given an official explanation. After countless debates among the players, they came up with this conjecture. The players guessed that the system changed the settings to control the total amount of sword essence produced in the game. Gohan paused. According to the model in reality, as long as you kill Yuan Ko, you'll definitely obtain a certain amount of sword essence points. This way, the players will kill the Yuan Ko in the game in a frenzy. The sword essence production in the game will exceed the system's control. However, if we use the method of dropping the sword essence pill, the drop rate will be in the hands of the system. The system can completely control the sword essence production in the entire game by adjusting the production rate of the sword essence pill. According to what you're saying, the sword essence we obtain through the game is bestowed to us by the system? Songhama said in disbelief. But didn't the game's official website say that the reason why Sword Maiden Online increases the sword essence in our bodies is because it can stimulate the nervous system in our brains and increase the sword essence in our bodies? You actually believe the nonsense written by those people from the council. Liu Ling, who had been listening to Gahan and Songhama's conversation, added, Li Xian also said that sword elements originate from high-level elements in dimensional rifts. How can it be produced? By stimulating the brain. If that's the case, as long as the brain is constantly stimulated, wouldn't everyone be a famous sword wielder with more than 10,000 sword elements? What do you think is the reason? Gohan pretended to ask casually. The Liunian clan had participated in the entire core project of Sword Maiden Online. As the future head of the Liunian clan, he definitely knew the truth behind Sword Maiden Online. Because she created Sword Maiden Online for, just as Liunian Ling was about to reveal the truth, she stopped at the crucial moment. Instead, she quietly whispered into Gahan's ear, as long as you promise to be my disciple, I'll tell you the truth. Forget it. Gahan turned his head away. It was enough as long as the sword elements in Sword Maiden Online were genuine. Who cared about the conspiracy behind it? If there was a conspiracy to destroy humanity, Liunian Ling wouldn't tell an outsider like him. The students of class 2269-4 entered the arena one by one and passed the first round of training. In fact, most of them were like Chun Yongsheng. Although they managed to kill Yuan Ko in the end, their performance was very pathetic. However, one or two students performed very well. Under their mature and calm commands, their sword maidens easily killed Yuan Ko. The two students were a man and a woman. The man was mentioned previously. Apart from Gahan, Songhama, and Liunian Ling, he was the only sword wielder with a natural sword maiden. His name was Fei Song. The other person was the female sword wielder, Luo Shuehan. Her sword maiden was the same as Ming Yu's in the game. As the student number 27 left the arena, the progress of the practical training finally advanced to number 28, which was Liunian Ling's number. Student A.O. Lin, please enter the arena. After Li Xian said that, he saw a beautiful and generous young girl enter the arena with a cold expression and a fluttering white dress behind her. Isn't this the woman who embarrassed me just now? Li Xian's heart skipped a beat. He quietly tapped on his personal terminal. System, release Yuan Ko. Li Xian gave the order. Soon, the cage in the middle of the arena rose again. This time, a delicate man with pointy ears appeared in the cage. He carried an aquamarine vine bough and arrow on his back. Oh my God, that's a forest elf archer, the surrounding crowd exclaimed. This was because of a very famous phenomenal television series, The Elf King. The main enemy in this series was the Yuan Ko tribe, the Forest Elf Kingdom. It was very well known in the hearts of ordinary people, just like Li Yunlong had been in the hearts of humans 1,000 years ago. The Forest Elf Archer was the most basic combat unit in the Forest Elf Kingdom. Thanks to the Elf King, all the students present knew Yuan Ko's data in detail. The Forest Elf Archer was classified as a rat-level Yuan Ko in the Yuan Ko Illustrated Handbook. It was considered the lowest level Yuan Ko. However, his actual combat strength had reached the level of a tiger-level Yuan Ko. In fact, he was even at the upper level of a tiger-level Yuan Ko. This was because although the Forest Elf Archer's attack power and health were not high, his body was frighteningly agile. He could dodge many Sword Maiden's attacks. This Yuan Ko had even created a super record of facing an ancient sword-level Sword Maiden's attacks for 10 minutes without being touched. Many ancient sword-level swordsmen saw the Forest Elf Archer in the wild and did not even have the interest to fight. They just turned and left. This is bad. I suspect that A.O. Lin Sword Maiden won't even be able to touch that Forest Elf Archer for 5 minutes. I bet that this forest elf archer will break through A.O. Lin's personal shield and become the first person for teacher Li Xian to save. The surrounding students discussed, expressing that they were not optimistic about A.O. Lin. Suddenly, a dry voice rang out. Did you forget? A.O. Lin Sword Maiden is a treasured sword level heaven-seeking sword. The surrounding crowd instantly quieted down. How could they have forgotten? It seemed like the unlucky one was this forest elf archer. In the arena, Li Xian could not hear the crowd's discussion. He also did not know that A.O. Lin was a treasured sword-level swordsman. He had specially brought out the forest elf archer to see A.O. Lin make a fool of herself. If A.O. Lin's shield did not shatter and she did not end up in a sorry state, he was determined not to save A.O. Lin. He wanted to humiliate this woman who had embarrassed him. However, Li Xian still felt that it was a pity. This was because he had originally arranged for this forest elf archer to be with Gohan. He wanted to see Gohan beaten up by the forest elf archer more. It was a pity that A.O. Lin had taken the blame this time. This fellow had benefited. However, Li Xian did not regret it. As long as he was still Gohan's practical teacher, he had enough means to torture this fellow who dared to snatch his maid from him. Wow, F***CK. So powerful. The heaven-seeking sword is too awesome. Li Xian was just fantasizing about how he would humiliate Gohan when he heard cheers outside the arena. Li Xian was taken aback. He looked up and saw that the forest elf archer was already dead on the ground. Beside his corpse, a dimensional vortex was slowly forming. As for A.O. Lin's sword lady, she had already loosened the bun on her head and placed her long, black, and beautiful hair into the dimensional vortex. Win. Li Xian felt that his brain could no longer process the facts before his eyes. This was Yuan Ko, who was close to a high-level tiger level. How could he die in the blink of an eye? Right, there's still the surveillance footage. Li Xian hurriedly used his personal terminal to connect to the surveillance footage and found the footage from 1 minute ago. In the video, the moment the forest elf archer was released from a cage, he immediately distanced himself from A.O. Lin and quickly retreated. In the process of retreating, he continuously shot out sharp arrows with his bow. This was the forest archer's combat style. First, he used long-range attacks to deplete his opponent's defense and stamina. Then, he used his dagger to reap his opponent's life in close combat. The forest elf archer's plan was very good, but he had no idea what kind of opponent he was facing. In the face of the incoming arrows, Heaven's Inquisition, who was originally behind A.O. Lin, took a slight step forward and instantly stood in front of A.O. Lin. The Heaven's Inquisition's sword in his hand slashed through the air, and all the arrows froze in the air as if they had been immobilized. Go! Heaven's Inquisition snorted. Those arrows that were fixed in place returned to where they came from. Furthermore, they returned at an even faster and more ruthless speed. This speed was so fast that the forest elf archer didn't even have time to activate the evasive maneuver that he was so proud of. His own arrows pierced through his heart, killing him instantly. The entire battle recorded in the video did not exceed 10 seconds. This is... Li Xian's forehead was dripping with sweat. He did not know what Sword Lady Heaven's Inquisition looked like, but he knew that this was the ability of the Sword Lady, who was ranked 3rd on the Treasure Sword record. Sword Lady Heaven's Inquisition's 4th grade ability, Ask the Heavens. Based on the Sword Lady's strength, she can control the things in the sky that are of a corresponding level. Li Xian could not believe that A.O. Lin was actually a Treasure Sword rank sword wielder. Moreover, she was a powerful sword wielder who had carved a Treasure Sword Lady's sword mark into a 4th grade and above sword mark. Compared to her, Li Xian, who had just been promoted to a Treasure Sword rank sword wielder for less than 2 days, was nothing. Chapter 105. A person who was used to being domineering would usually wilt when faced with an opponent who was stronger than him. Li Xian was such a person. When he realized that A.O. Lin Sword Lady was actually a Treasure Sword Lady, asking Heaven's Sword, he did not even dare to say a word. He stood awkwardly at the side of the challenge ring. It was only after Ao Lin left the ring that he regained some of his vigor. Number 29, Song Hama, come up. Li Xian called out Song Hama's name weakly. Song Hama's opponent was also a desert wolf. Although the battle was not as fast as Ao Lin's, it was still very entertaining. When Cast Cloud Steel took out his 2-meter-long sword, the desert wolf's eyes were filled with despair. However, this desert wolf did not give up. It chose to do the same thing as the previous desert wolf. It wanted to cause trouble for Song Hama, who was commanding from behind. In the end, a tragedy happened. When Cast Cloud Steel saw that the desert wolf was about to attack Song Hama, he shouted, "Don't hurt my best friend." Then, without hesitation, he swung his sword at the desert wolf. Needless to say, the casted cloud iron's accuracy and strength were quite good. The huge casted cloud iron sword smashed into the desert wolf's butt, causing it to fall to the ground. Then, it continued flying forward until it reached the edge of the stage, giving the nearby spectators a fright. Fortunately, a dimensional crystal pillar had stopped it at the critical moment. Otherwise, if the huge sword had smashed into the student's head again, he would at least be seriously injured. You actually want to bully Cast Cloud Steel's best friend. The tall and burly Cast Cloud Steel rushed to the side of the desert wolf that had its butt injured and was unable to move. He did not even use his sword. His fist, which was the size of a clay pot, directly smashed into the poor desert wolf's head. He did not expect the sword lady to have such powerful combat ability even without her treasured sword. In just 4 or 5 punches, the desert wolf was bleeding from its 7 orifices. Its pupils were dilated, and it could not be more dead. Such a bloody and violent scene made the onlookers' blood boil with excitement. Even the 2 unlucky kids who were almost smashed just now were enjoying it. Beauty fighting with wild beasts was an everlasting human entertainment. By the way, Cast Cloud Iron had extended her 1-meter-long leg into the dimensional vortex. Presumably, the hilt of Cast Cloud Iron's sword was in her leg. As for where exactly, only Song Hama knew. By the way, after the Cast Cloud metal finished absorbing the sword essences in the dimensional vortex, Song Hama was prepared to let her return to the sword and use the sword mark transfer technique to transfer the sword essences, but she was rejected. Cast Cloud Iron proudly patted his chest. Returning the sword is too troublesome. We're good friends, so why are we being so polite? After that, she directly pulled Song Hama into her arms, and then took the initiative to cover Song Hama's lips with her own. It was really enviable. Number 30, Gahan, it's your turn. After Song Hama's battle for a while, Li Xian's fear of Ao Lin gradually faded. Immediately, a sense of shame and anger surged in his heart. I was actually King scared by my own student. This made Li Xian feel terrible. For a person like Li Xian, once he suffered a setback, he would try every means possible to get back at him. However, he did not dare cause trouble for Ao Lin. Firstly, he could not defeat Ao Lin. Secondly, he did not dare make any small moves. The sword-bearer who could synchronize the natural sword lady, Tianwen's sword, had long been placed on the sword committee's list of people to be closely watched. If he caused trouble for Ao Lin, he would definitely be noticed by the higher-ups. Many of the despicable things he had done might be exposed. As a result, Li Xian's target of revenge naturally shifted to Gahan. Gahan, who had a grudge with him, was the most suitable target for revenge. Student Gahan, get ready for battle. Li Xian's voice was very calm, and there was nothing unusual about it. However, secretly, he clicked on a dark red option on his personal terminal. Li Xian had decided to release the strongest combat power in the beginner combat arena. 20 days ago, during the graduation ceremony of the class that Li Xian had been in charge of leading for practical training, he had worked together to capture a small demon beast alive and sent it to the building of practical training as a gift for his juniors. The little devilish beast was a tiger-level primordial puppet. It was the most powerful primordial puppet that could be released in the beginner's practical combat arena. It was also the most powerful primordial puppet that Li Xian had the authority to summon and use. Compared to the forest elf archer from before, the tiger-level small demon beast was much stronger. Before it had broken through to become a treasure sword-level sword wielder and possessed its own treasure sword-level sword mistress, it had been an ancient sword-level sword wielder for more than 10 years. Even Li Xian, who had more than 3,000 quartz worth of sword elements, did not dare say that he could defeat the small demon beast. Most importantly, the small demon beast was a flying unit. A sword mistress without long-range attack abilities could not even think of touching the small demon beast's skin. Most ancient sword-level sword mistresses were close combat sword mistresses who were not capable of flying or long-range attacks. In his opinion, unless Gahan was a treasure sword-level sword wielder like Ao Lin, there was no way he could be a match for the small demon beast. Before deciding to release the small demon beast, Li Xian had specially looked up Gahan's student card in the school's database. It clearly stated that he was an ancient sword-level sword wielder, and his sword element was only 109 quarks. When he saw this number, Li Xian was completely relieved. A useless ancient sword-level sword wielder like Gahan, who had just reached 100 quarks, would definitely not be a match for the small demon beast. Then, he would be able to enjoy the sight of Gahan being trampled by the small demon beast. Then, when he was half dead, he would appear in front of him like a savior and save his little life. At that time, even if he guessed that he was tricking him, he would still have to thank him obediently. Just thinking about it made him feel very wonderful. The only problem was how to explain to the school afterward. Explain why he had released a tiger-level Yuan Ko to be the opponent of a new sword wielder. This was a very troublesome problem. In fact, Li Xian could not think of any reason to explain this problem. Before this, his original plan was to use the forest elf archer to torture Gahan. He did not expect to use it on Ao Lin first. Releasing the small demon beast was an impulsive decision that Li Xian had made on the spur of the moment. Forget it, it doesn't matter. It's enough as long as I don't kill this guy. At worst, I'll be expelled from the school. After Li Xian comforted himself, he gave up on thinking about how to explain things in the future. Instead, he focused all his attention on the battle that he had planned. It was a battle where the little evil beasts were beating up Gahan. When the cage with Gahan, as Gahan's opponent slowly rose, the small demon beast flapped its wings and escaped from the cage. There was not much of a reaction in the training room. Not many people knew that the Yuan Ko that Gahan was facing was a genuine tiger-level Yuan Ko. This was because the small demon beast was a very rare Yuan Ko that rarely appeared in front of humans. If one did not look up the information, there were not many people in Yuzhong City who knew about the small demon beast. In addition, the small demon beast's body was very petite. It was round and looked like a ball with a pair of thick, beastly feet on its body. It did not have arms, but it had a pair of bat wings on its back that allowed it to fly freely. If it did not fly, the small demon beast would move like a tortoise. Therefore, in the eyes of most of the onlookers, it was just a weak, rat-level Yuan Ko. However, at least two people knew that it was a tiger-level small demon beast. One of them was Gahan, and the other was Liuyan Ling, who had a curious smile on her face. Disciple Gahan, it seems like only the 5 forms of fleeting time can save you from this small demon beast. Liuyan Ling was secretly delighted. In her opinion, unless Gahan used the 5 forms of fleeting time that she had taught him, he would definitely lose. However, if he used the 5 forms of fleeting time, he would have half a foot in the door of the Liu family. The small demon beast was a rather intelligent Yuan Ko. It was a Yuan Ko that was famous for its cunning in the original world. Although it had lost its basic rationality when it transmigrated to another dimension, its combat instincts were still there. Before a battle, the little demonic beasts would always carefully observe their opponents. Only after observing enough information would they use the most suitable method to fight. Therefore, when the small demon beast escaped from its cage, it did not foolishly rush forward to fight like Yuan Ko. Instead, it flew on the spot and flapped its wings, observing Gahan's every move. What about Gahan? He stayed where he was, not moving at all. However, he did not observe the small demon beast. The information about the small demon beast was stored in his mind in great detail. Although his opponent was a tiger-level Yuan Ko, Gohan was confident that he could kill it as long as he had Qingpin's sword in hand. Fighting someone of a higher rank was a common thing for a swordmaster. The reason why Gohan hesitated was because he was considering whether he should fight the small demon beast himself and end the battle with ease. Or should he let Qingpin fight in the form of a sword mistress? In the previous battle with Yi Xian, Qingpin was the same as King Yu. She did not know any swordsmanship, nor did she have any combat foundation. Letting Qingpin fight was no different from asking her to die. However, this was a rare opportunity for actual combat. If he allowed Qingpin to tire herself out just because she did not know any swordsmanship, then when would Qingpin become a qualified swordmistress? Gohan hesitated again and again. He wanted to ask Qingpin for her opinion, but then he saw Qingpin sleeping soundly in his pouch. Her saliva had even covered his shirt. All right, there's no need to hesitate anymore. If this cute girl continues to tire herself out, who knows how lazy she will become. Hey, Qingpin, wake up. Gohan patted Qingpin's face. Gohan, what's wrong? Is it time to eat? Qingpin rubbed his eyes, poked his head out, and rubbed Gohan's neck. Gohan, Qingpin wants to eat meat. No problem. I'll give you meat to eat tonight. Gohan took Qingpin out of the pouch and placed her on the ground. He then quickly retreated, distancing himself from Qingpin. As long as you defeat this small demon beast. Chapter 106. I'll eat meat if I win the fight. Qingpin's eyes lit up when she heard Gohan's promise. The Qingpin sword appeared out of thin air in the cute girl's hand. Hey, Gohan, will Qingpin be able to eat meat tonight if I defeat this black ball? Qingpin pointed at the little demonic beast opposite her and asked Gohan. That's right. You'll get meat if you defeat this black ball. Gohan replied. His attention was completely focused on Qingpin. Once he discovered that Qingpin's personal shield was at risk of being broken, he would immediately let Qingpin return to the sword, and he would destroy the little demonic beast as the swordmaster. Hee, you're dead meat. I'll let you have a taste of Qingpin's power. The temptation of meat was probably too much. Qingpin did not even think about it. She strode forward with her short legs and brandished the Qingpin sword as she rushed towards the little demonic beast. It was obvious that Qingpin wanted to run faster. However, her short legs meant that her speed was about the same as a child's. Qingpin's somewhat cute running movements immediately caused the onlookers to burst into laughter. To be clear, they were laughing and not ridiculing. They thought that Qingpin was too cute when she ran, so they could not help but laugh. There was only one person who laughed maliciously and mockingly. This person was none other than Li Xian. When he saw the Guhan Sword Maiden's clumsy movements, he felt that this wave of attacks was a sure thing. Unexpectedly, when Qingpin ran with her short legs, the little demon did not attack her. She continued to carefully observe Qingpin's situation. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Qingpin smoothly ran under the little demonic beast's body. She lifted her Qingpin sword above her head and aimed it at the little demonic beast floating above her head. 1 slash, 2 slashes, 3 slashes. It cannot be helped. The little demonic beast could fly. Qingpin's 1.2-meter body and the length of the Qingpin sword could not reach the little demonic beast that was more than 3 meters tall. Qingpin slashed 7 or 8 times, but none of the slashes could touch the little demonic beast above her head. She turned her head and looked at Gohan with teary eyes. She felt wronged and said, Gohan, this black ball can't come down. Qingpin can't reach it. Tell him to come down and fight Qingpin. Did Gohan have the ability to tell the little demonic beast to fly down? Of course, Gohan did not have the ability, so Gohan could only shake his head helplessly. At this time, the little demonic beast finally made a move, probably because she had figured out Qingpin's ability. The little demonic beast flapped its wings, and 7 or 8 syringes with needles shot out like bullets towards Qingpin below. This was the little demonic beast's skill, Little Devil Dart. These flying syringes were filled with a neurotoxin. As long as it came into contact with the skin, it would paralyze the sword mistress. Most importantly, this attack could ignore the sword mistress's personal shield. At the very least, it could ignore the sword mistress' personal shield. The sharp tip of the syringe could pierce through the defense of a close-fitting shield. This kind of skill that could ignore close-fitting shields was very rare among all the Yuanwees. This was also one of the reasons why Little Evil was able to be ranked among the top Tiger-class Yuanwees. Facing this kind of attack, our pitiful Qingpin did not have the slightest ability to resist. Moreover, the little demonic beast was very hateful as it aimed at one spot and shot. After this wave of skills was over, there were 3 or 4 syringes stuck in Qingpin's face. I don't know if it was because Qingpin's skin was too thick, but although the syringes were shaky, they were still firmly stuck in his face and did not fall off. "God, it hurts!" Qingpin turned his head with tears in his eyes and showed the syringes on his face to Gahan. Through the sword mark, he said to Gahan, "Gahan, Qingpin has to eat at least 5 kilograms of meat tonight to recover." "All right, 5 kilograms it is." Gahan looked at Qingpin's adorable face, full of syringes, and felt very distressed. However, this was also the reason why Gahan wanted to train Qingpin. In the future, if he faced a desperate situation where he had to fight to the death, Qingpin would not be able to protect himself if he did not have some skills. Hearing Gahan agree to his request, Qingpin's tears turned into a smile. His small hand pulled out the syringes on his face in one breath. What was strange was that the paralysis effect of the little devil's darts did not seem to be triggered. Under normal circumstances, Qingpin, who was hit by the little devil's darts, would be in a paralyzed state. His body would not be able to move, and he would allow the little demonic beast to attack him without being able to resist. However, Qingpin was clearly hit by the darts, but he was still alive and kicking as he blindly slashed at the little demonic beast in the sky. Could it be that the poison needle had passed its expiration date? The little demonic beast did not believe it and shot the syringes on his face again. This time, Qingpin did not make any progress and was still pierced in the face by the little demonic beast. However, it did not matter. Qingpin blindly slashed at the sky with even more vigor. The little demonic beast was enraged and used the little devil's darts for the 3rd time. This is a good opportunity. Qingpin, he cannot use the little devil's darts anymore. The little demonic beast can only use the little devil's darts 3 times within a certain period of time. Gahan quickly conveyed this information to Qingpin through the sword mark. This was the information recorded in Yuan Ko's illustrated handbook. The little demonic beast body did not have an unlimited number of syringes. It could only use the little devil's darts 3 times within 30 minutes. Qingpin, the little devil's darts, is the little demonic beast's only long-range attack method. If he wants to attack you again, you will have to land. This is your chance. Didn't I teach you a set of basic sword techniques last night? Now use that set of basic sword techniques to deal with the little demonic beast. Okay, Gahan. The poor girl's voice was loud and clear, and she agreed in a childish voice. The development of the battle was just as Gahan predicted. The little demonic beast, who had lost its long-range attack method, hovered in the air for a while. It let out a mouse-like cry and flew 8 meters into the air. Then, like a dive bomber, it swooped down towards Qingpin's position. In fact, the little demonic beast could fly even higher. Unfortunately, the 2nd floor of the building of practical training was only 8 meters high. This was the little demonic beast's 2nd skill, bat wing flap. With the help of the high-speed dive, it could use its wings to directly attack the enemy. This skill of the little demonic beast was usually used together with the little devil's darts. After the little demonic beast had successfully paralyzed the enemy, it could use the bat wing flap to attack the enemy's face, which could cause great damage to the enemy. However, Qingpin was not paralyzed. This meant that the little demonic beast's attack power was greatly reduced, or rather, the gains did not make up for the losses. Although the little demonic beast's wings eventually hit Qingpin's face, at the same time, Qingpin's demon-like little hands had also successfully grabbed the little demonic beast. Now that it was caught, the little demonic beast could no longer leave. Qingpin's little hands seemed to have grown a pair of suction cups as they firmly latched onto the little demonic beast's round body. Looking at it with the naked eye, Qingpin did not even seem to be grabbing or hugging the little demonic beast. He was just holding the little demonic beast like he was holding a basketball. However, no matter how hard the little demonic beast flapped its wings, it could not fly away from Qingpin's hands. Hens could at least fly 1 or 2 meters above the ground, but the little demonic beast couldn't even fly a centimeter above the ground. Legend had it that before the apocalypse, the Wu-Tang sect had a method of borrowing force to fight force. However, it could make a bird stay in one's hand, unable to fly. From the looks of it, Qingpin's current method was similar to borrowing force to fight force. However, according to the information in the game, shouldn't the basic skill of poor player be? In sword form, if the wielder successfully hits the opponent with a stab, the damage will be permanently increased by 0.0001. Should there be such an effect? Since when did Qingpin have a skill that could make a bird lose the ability to fly? Qingpin, is this your ability? It can make flying animals lose the ability to fly. Gohan directly conveyed the doubts in his heart to Qingpin through the sword mark. Qingpin doesn't know either. Qingpin just thinks that this thing flying around is too annoying. It would be great if he cannot fly. Then, he would really not be able to fly. Qingpin's answer made Gohan stunned. It was not a method of borrowing force. He just wanted to make it unable to fly, and it really couldn't fly. Was this still a normal ability? If Qingpin wanted the little demonic beast to die, would it not die? If it really died, and this ability was real, then what was the point of fighting? He could just let Qingpin make a wish and let Yuan Ko all die. If this was true, then the title of Emperor's Sword might not be worthy of Qingpin. Qingpin, try to make a wish and let this little demonic beast die. Gohan decided to do an experiment to see how good Qingpin's ability was. Oh, hearing Gohan's words, Qingpin closed its small eyes and shook its head, trying hard to wish the little demonic beast to die. In the end, the little demonic beast's wings patted Qingpin's face a few more times. Qingpin, try to make a wish again and let this little demonic beast's wings immediately break. However, direct death exceeded the intensity of the wish. Gohan decided to reduce the intensity of the wish to try. In the end, the little demonic beast patted Qingpin's face a few more times. Next, Gohan made Qingpin make a few more wishes, but none of them came true. Even though Gohan made Qingpin make a wish to restore the little demonic beast's ability to fly, it still didn't work. It seems that this ability is a one-time use. Gohan silently thought. Although the plan to train Qingpin this time was not successful, he unexpectedly discovered Qingpin's special ability, which was also a pleasant surprise. Qingpin, kill this little demonic beast. Oh, Qingpin threw the little demonic beast to the ground. Having lost its ability to fly, the little demonic beast could only rely on its pair of feet to walk. It looked like a clumsy duck. Facing Qingpin's raised Qingpin sword, the little demonic beast no longer had the slightest ability to resist. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.